Hey y'all, how's everybody doing today? I figured me and my friend here, who's in my chair and doesn't think he needs to move, we're gonna get this day going. But he's got other ideas. So I guess let's see where we head. Kiki's in charge today.
You're beautiful but unsatisfied since day one. You were getting teased and it scarred you when you were young. Now you're getting older and you've been on the grind. Your paper off the scale so you feel like it's time. So you got a nose job, that's the primary thing. People tease you as a kid and for some reason you hit. Always into high fashion, girl, you heavy like lead. Liposuction out your shell like a chicken and egg. Feeling confident but now you're becoming obsessed. First your nose, then your weight, now your butt and your breast. It's a vanity fair, cosmetic overdose. Fiending for a next operation like it was dope. Now you feel the need to skin pill, your skin's no good. But if those around you were real, they'll tell you the truth. Just because you spending thousands, that don't make it alright. Had one problem, now it's many going under the knife. Your lips, breasts, butt, legs, waist, hips, nose and chest, waistline, facelines, looking your best. Do it like the rest, Vanity Fair. I said your lips, breasts, butt, legs, waist, hips, nose and chest, waistline, facelines, looking your best. Do it like the rest, Vanity Fair. Come on. Vanity Fair, yeah. Changing one or two things, cool girl, do you? Do you wanna be beautiful and look like you? Or do you wanna look like someone you saw in a magazine or video, but not in the raw? I like nice shaped bodies, bikinis Brazilian, but too much of anything just isn't appealing. Some people spend a lifetime, even a million. No grace like those unhappy when chilling. A girl with a big butt, big lips, small hips is what we all love to see, and men dream about this. There is nothing wrong with getting something broken fixed. Some women get a breast job cause cancer assists. Some women want to please their man and insist. And a woman really loves you if she wants to do this. But abuse ain't the same as intention with care. So be careful of the drug called the Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair. Your lips, breasts, butt, legs, waist, hips, nose and chest, waistline, facelines, looking your best. Do it like the rest, Vanity Fair. I said your lips, breasts, butt, legs, waist, hips, nose and chest, waistline, facelines, looking your best. Do it like the rest, Vanity Fair. Your lips, breasts, butt, legs, waist, hips, nose and chest, waistline, facelines, looking your best. Do it like the rest, Vanity Fair. I said your lips, breasts, butt, legs, waist, hips, nose and chest, waistline, faceline, look at your best. Do it like the rest, Vanity Fair. Come on.
Hey y'all, hold on, let me go back up here. Everybody's live this morning, so it's perfect. Well, this afternoon, I guess it's afternoon for some of you. It's noon here, but it's perfect timing for us to do something that we like to talk about so we can actually discuss and talk about these things. So we're going to dive back into the Joseph Edward Duncan situation. In that case, again, it's already closed. The situation is years old, but we are going to talk about it because we all need a break. And this is a very sad, disturbing case in general. But we're going to get into that today and hang out. And then later this afternoon, of course, per usual, I will go live and talk about the other BS that's going on out here. But we're going to talk about some other stuff. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that Justice? I'm so sorry. Hey, Tina, it is what it is. Oh, that's cool. Snow days suck, though. I'm sorry, you guys are still getting snow, too. Hey, Cash. Hey, Gina. Susan. Is it Wim? Wim? I'm probably butchering that. Oh, wait, what are you guys talking about? Is it Vim or Wim? Let me see. Wim. It is Wim. Okay. Politics and religion in workplaces. Oh, those are horrible topics. Hey, Angel. Sorry, I'm reading your guys' comments. Hey, Amethyst. Celine, London Girl, Harper, Revival, True Crime Dime, Cool Gamer, LK. I always do that. I open that and then I want to take a drink while I'm doing this. Cherish, Cheryl, Susan, Freeside. I've been calling you Fireside forever. I just realized that the other day. I was like, wow, I need to read. I need glasses. Hey, the Zynga. It's supposed to be 55 today, but then we're supposed to get horrible snowstorms. Crazy. I'm so over it. Hey, Krug's wifey. Hey, Rissa. Hey, Lisa. Oh, that's good, Lisa. There you go. Rumor spreading around. Oh, I've never been to New Orleans. Hopefully that's a good place. I bet it's beautiful. I bet you have nice weather too. Cat Rat, which one? I don't know where he's at. He's around. Hey, Outside the Box with Chloe Joe. Yes, we're going to talk about that at 4 o'clock. I already scheduled a live. I downloaded that. Thankfully, my internet came back on and I was able to download her live. I am going to talk about that though, because I am too. I am actually going to call it out. I don't care for a lot of her behaviors that she's displayed, but this is, again, yesterday, I said it very loudly. The display that we're seeing is intentional. Like, she's intentionally picking people out of her inner circle, even because she has nobody left. Molly has nobody left, and people are finally standing up for their own integrity and giving themselves value, which is amazing. But we'll talk about that later. Oh my gosh. Freeside. I can't believe it. I was laughing so hard. I was like, what the hell have I been doing? Hey, Commander. All right, let's get into this. These videos that I'm going to show you today have been out here for a long time. They're somebody else's content, but it's already been broken down so well. I went through and picked out a few that really break down different pieces of it. Some of this is actually stuff you guys have already heard. One thing I do want to correct is I stated that Joseph Edward Duncan was on probation. He was on bond, but I said he was on bond out of North Dakota. He actually was on bond out of Minnesota when this crime occurred. He was living in North Dakota. He had a North Dakota address, but he was actually on bond out of Minnesota because he had traveled over to Minnesota, committed another crime, and was on bond when he took off and committed this last crime. So today we're going to talk a lot about that, and we're just going to get into it. So buckle up. If you like horror stories, this is one of the worst. And I've seen a lot of you guys say, like, you know, the area, you remember this case. Some of you guys will really like one of the topics that I'm going to talk about coming up, the Florence, Montana murders. And we've got missing people out of Browning, Montana. Like, those of you in that area, pay attention, because I found us some stories that we're going to talk about. Hey, Savvy Alley. Hey, Nana L. How's everybody doing? Oh, by the way, too, just in case anybody knows, because people are like freaking out, thinking I'm booting people out of memberships. No, you had a gifted membership, chances are, and that gifted membership is only good for a month. So it doesn't renew. So that's why you will be in the membership for a month and then out. Like, it's nothing to do with anybody kicking you out. It's just that your membership that you were gifted has ran out. So I'll probably have to continue to say that, because it's obviously like a month ago, a lot of people were gifted. So have you lost weight? You're looking, no, no. I fluctuate with weight. No, I have not, though. You lost 17 pounds. Good for you. Yeah, Jessica, me too. There's no respect there, but I have to give props where props are due. Hey, Ice Queen. Thank you. Okay, well, let's go. Let me see here. Oh, rumors spreading around. Thank you for joining the membership. I appreciate you. Hold on. Let me find the button. I got to find my buttons better. I should stop organizing stuff, because then I organize it the wrong way. Thank you for joining the membership. Welcome to the jungle. We got fun and games. It's actually called the Cabana, but it's pretty much like a jungle. Lindsay Lohan is pregnant. Is that the same Lindsay Lohan from when we were kids? I go back and forth with weight like this. With autoimmune issues, I can bloat and look like I've gained 30 pounds overnight. Like, it's part of autoimmune. It's part of fibro. It's part of all of it. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Revival. Free side. What's going to happen is you're going to end up with a nickname because I'm so ridiculous and can never get it right. And I'm going to go back and forth. Hey, L. So you'll end up with a nickname too. You see, I cheat my way out of things. I just cheat. I just make up names. That's what we do over here. Yeah, everybody does. You know how much I miss just sitting here talking to you guys sometimes, like just actually having normal conversations. I feel like every time I come on here, I'm in such a hellfire bent way of like, got to get it all out. Got to say what I actually feel. Got to make sure I'm clear. And I just miss like, the normal conversations sometimes. I just miss being able to breathe and not have like the pressure of everything I say. Every little thing can be misconstrued and is intentionally being looked at to be misconstrued. It's so hard. So this is so enjoyable to me just to like hang out with you guys and chat. Hey, Nada. Hey, dear Krabby. AJ. Hey, y'all. Thanks for popping in. Okay. We'll have normal conversation. Good. I'm glad. The fire needs to be lit. There's a lot of people that need to get some integrity and some moral bounds. And I just say what I feel and feel what I say. Oh, it's Pi Day. I'll have to tell Kyle that. All right. Yeah. Okay. Nana L, thank you. I've been calling free side, fireside for the last 8 months and just finally learned and corrected it myself. Oh my goodness. What the hell? All right. Let's get into this one. This is actually really interesting. And we can discuss and talk about it. Hi, Gone Girl. What the hell? Thank you. What is going on here? I don't even thank you. You guys are too kind to me. I swear I don't even know what to say when you guys do this stuff. Thank you so much. I get so caught off guard by how generous and kind people are. You'll just have to excuse me. Thank you. Like, I genuinely, you guys are incredible over here to me all the time. And I am so appreciative of you guys allowing me the space to just be myself with you too. Like, a lot of you don't expect anything out of me, but to be myself. And I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you. All right, let's go. Yeah, I know. I'm like, hey, always happy. Jezebel. They're always big mad, Jezebel. We don't even have to do anything. They're just mad. We just exist over here. All right. Joseph Edward Duncan, one of the last, so you guys have context, one of the last men to receive the death penalty in Idaho. He actually died on death row. He had an entire family of 4 were his last victims. A family of 5, one lone survivor out of that. She is still alive and lives in Idaho to this day. But then during the course of that investigation, he was actually charged with 3 other murders. Anthony Martinez out of California and 2 sisters out of the Seattle, Washington area. They'll tell you their names again. It's absolutely horrible. So just so you kind of have an understanding, they do give you context in this and kind of go back through it. And then we'll pick up more of that. Cash. You expect a lot from Kenzie, not me.
Now, back to our video.
Oh, let me
The
give
state
you.
of Idaho's motto is.
Let me give you this is serial killers documentary. I'll share the link. I'll share the channel link. Serial killers documentaries. That's why the voice is so lit, but it's great. Great content.
Esto Perpetua, and it means to let it be perpetual. It is forever. It seems like a fitting motto for a state that was pretty much established by the Jesuits in the early 1840s, and gives pause for one to wonder what its motto might have been had it been founded by another group. Nowadays, Ohio's family and religious values are heavily influenced by the Mormons, also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Nonetheless, Idaho is as unusual in its diversity as it is in its natural beauty, with a topography that consists of many mountains that reach elevations of 8,000 feet and areas like that of Hell's Canyon.
All right, before we go any further, I got to ask this. I want a 1 in the chat if you've been to Idaho. A 2 in the chat, never been to Idaho. Yes, Anthony Martinez. Yeah. And the sad thing is his story. Y'all, I have found us so many stories of missing people that are like years old, that the people have been begging for help, that have been overlooked. Like, I found so many things for us to talk about. A lot of you have not. A lot of you have. Okay, so it's like a 50-50. Yunzi, I know. Hey, T. Hey, let's be honest. Hey, all of you guys. Okay, so it's about a 50-50 split. Idaho is very beautiful. It is a beautiful area, especially northern Idaho, which this is northern Idaho. Southern Idaho is where Boise's at, which you guys have heard a lot about. If you've been following the Idaho 4 case, that is considered mid-Idaho, I guess you would say. It's on the Idaho-Washington border, but Idaho is shaped really weird, and it is a very, very interesting area. So northern Idaho is vastly known for the Aryan Brotherhood, the KKK involvement up there. It is 100%. They say that it's been abolished. It doesn't exist. That is bullshit. It is absolutely alive and well. The compound might not be used as much, but the compound in Hayden Lake, which is right outside of where this crime actually happened, is very, very alive and well. It is not diverse whatsoever. Idaho is beautiful, but it is lacking in so many things. And I have a lot of views on it. It's bad.
Where the terrain plummets to 1,500 feet. Idaho's scenery is often breathtaking, and recreational opportunities such as world-class skiing, kayaking, hiking, backpacking, fishing, whitewater rafting, snowmobiling, and snowboarding, to name a few, abound. Liberty and freedom are very important to the citizens of Idaho, resulting in part in the state's lawmakers being historically known for writing laws that rarely infringe on individual or property rights. It's also common for residents to own firearms.
I don't personally know a single person in the state of Idaho that does not own firearms. Not a single person that I know of. Yeah. Yes. Yes, it is. And the reason why I picked this one is so you get some background to some of the context of not only that case, but Idaho in general, because people are now like, there's a lens on Idaho. There's been a lot of cases out of Idaho, horrible cases. We've got Michael Vaughn missing out of Idaho. We've got the Idaho 4. This case, there's been so many horrific crimes, missing people, everything. And Idaho laws are very, very touchy. And they're very protective of some shit.
When all is said and done,
it's definitely the old boys club. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. It's the old boys club in Idaho.
Doesn't make much sense that a convicted minor attracted individual would make a conscious decision to travel hundreds of miles from the Midwest to a state where his past deeds were not likely to be readily accepted, a region whose conservative residents were not likely to throw out the welcome mat and allow him to assimilate into their society. But that is exactly what sex criminal Joseph Edward Duncan III had done. And, in the process, his alleged criminal actions would literally shock and horrify the state, stun the nation, and ultimately destroy a family. As best as police have been able to determine, Joseph Edward Duncan III, 42...
Yes, the Daybell case is in Idaho. So the Daybell case spanned Idaho, Utah, Yellowstone Park. They were a part of in Yellowstone Park. So it kind of, Idaho, Utah, people go back and forth. But yes, the Idaho or the Daybell Vallow trial is in Idaho. It's actually in Boise, I think. Yes, for sure. And I think that starts soon. And then we have the other case in June starting, the Idaho
2 years old, fled Becker County, Minnesota, almost immediately after someone posted his $15,000 bond following an April 5, 2005 court hearing, where he'd been charged with forcing a 6-year-old boy and for attempting to force the boy's friend as well. After being released from custody, he apparently began...
If you missed the first part of this that we talked about, this man had committed 13 horrific sex crimes by the time he was 17. And his victims were some of the age in diapers. His words. Has admitted to this. He has given interviews. He did a whole blog when he was in prison, writing stuff. Like, he was very proud, but his sexual depravity and this, there's all sorts of different diagnoses this man was given after the fact, but he was in a boys' home in Tacoma, Washington, and victimized people there. He didn't see it as anything really problematic. He didn't report it because he didn't really see anything wrong with it. To him, it was exciting. Yeah, it is absolutely hell. And this man, for those crimes, he got sentenced to 20 years. He only spent 14 years in prison. Then he got out and reoffended and reoffended and reoffended and reoffended and reoffended. He was on bond for committing a crime in Minnesota when he killed this family. He was out on bond. The man should have never been allowed bond. The fifth nail guy. I don't know who that is, Cash, so I'm assuming probably not.
Began making his travel plans. He stopped by a Walmart and purchased night vision goggles and a video camcorder. At some point, he also obtained a shotgun, shells, and a claw hammer. 10 days later, on April 15, 2005, he rented a 2005 red Jeep Grand Cherokee in St. Paul, Minnesota. However,
Oh, by the way, I did check that for those of you that watched this with me the first time, and I said I wasn't sure if that was the right Jeep. It is the right Jeep in the videos. They just have a different coloring on their video or whatever, so that's why it looked darker, but it is the exact one, just to be clear. I told you guys I would make sure.
He never returned the vehicle at the termination of the rental agreement, and the Jeep was eventually reported to police as a stolen vehicle on May 4, 2005. Police would later learn that between the time the Jeep was rented and reported stolen, Duncan had traveled through parts of Missouri and had gone as far south as Newton County, located in the far southwestern corner of the state, in an area that borders Kansas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. It was there, on April 27, 2005, a little more than a week before the vehicle would be reported stolen to police in Minnesota, that he allegedly stole a set of license plates off of a vehicle and placed them on the Jeep that he was driving.
Think of how calculated he was. Like you said, no rehabbing this man. He should have never been out to begin with. The fact that he admitted to sexual crimes, 13 of them by the time he was 17, and only spent 14 years. And then he killed 7 people total and has one lone survivor. But can you imagine all the other people? I would be horrified to learn the total amount of victims he has. I would be horrified because I guarantee there's still people that have never came forward and talked about it. I guarantee it. This is the gentleman that I kept saying when we were talking about the Idaho 4 case, that this is who that reminds me of. He's a younger version. If you see pictures of Joseph Edward Duncan, the nose, the dead eyes, that blank stare, their smirk, they remind me so much of each other. Yes, Tina agreed. Yes, he was on the news. This was really well done in the news. I have to say that. Hey, Keith. They kept his face in the news or kept the kids' faces in the news to begin with. The media did good on this one.
It would later become clear to the police that he was fully capable of carefully planning his every move, as most sexual predators are.
Cash, I was just thinking about that because I couldn't remember his pen name, but you are correct. He was writing and they kept saying, people still say that wasn't him. There was no way. It's 100% him. The fifth nail guy, but that's what they deemed him. He went by some other pen name too. I have it written down. Okay, it is him. Thank you for verifying that. Yes, he does. And that's the crazy thing is he was blogging from in prison. They're like, there's no way he had a device. My sister was in prison in Idaho and she had a device. I paid for it. Kathy P, good question. Yeah, very good question. That's why we need to talk about like parole hearings and bond and stuff like that because craziness. Okay, let's go.
And had done so in this instance by disguising the vehicle that he was driving even before it had become necessary to do so. It must have been shortly after he had stolen the license plates in Missouri that he had decided to go to Idaho. Satisfied that he had given the authorities the slip, it's believed that Duncan headed north again.
That picture right there. Think of Brian Koberger with that picture right there. The eyes, the dead, like, well, the crooked nose. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they have phones in prison too and stuff like that. Yeah, he got out on bail because his friend bailed him out on bond for the last one, but he should have never even been given the option of having bail or a bond. He should have never. This is the picture that really reminds me of Brian, though.
Again, the exact route of which he had taken being unknown until he connected up with Interstate 90 at some point, most likely either in South Dakota or Wyoming, and headed west toward Idaho. While it's not precisely known when Duncan arrived in Idaho, it was while he was en route to that state that an arrest warrant was issued for him in Fargo, North Dakota, for failing to properly follow the conditions of his April 5th release and for missing a subsequent court date. No one apparently paid any mind to the sex offender driving the stolen Jeep with the stolen Missouri plates as he made his way west. But then, why would anyone? He was being careful in his cold and calculated planning, and had given little reason for anyone to pay any attention to him. Duncan arrived in Kootenai County, Idaho, sometime during the second week in May. Precisely why he stopped in the Wolf.
He was in Idaho from the middle of May, and these people, like, he just kind of went unnoticed. Just fit right in. That's the crazy part, is he stalked this family and seemingly went unnoticed.
Lodge area, located about 8 miles east of Coeur d'Alene and just off Interstate 90, is not known. Perhaps he had stopped there to grab a bite to eat or merely to rest for a while. At some point, however, he ended up on Frontage Road and drove past the small white cinder block and frame house with green.
That is hard for me to believe, knowing the area, because you have Interstate 90 and there's a big, huge fence that goes along it with a frontage road right to the side. But there was that lone house and then like Wolf Lodge, and there's a couple other houses scattered way back in there. But you would have to know where you're going, because that is not an exit that has services on it that normal people would take. It's not an exit that you would just take. He was absolutely looking to re-victimize somebody and find victims. He was 100%, because you don't just take that exit for anything. Like that exit, you are specifically going to Wolf Lodge, which is a really good steakhouse. But I guarantee that's not what he was doing. He was looking for victims.
Green trim, the lower portion of which appeared to have been coated with stucco, giving it a smooth appearance, where the Groan and Mackenzie family lived. The house, somewhat secluded and surrounded by trees, brush, and low-lying hills, made an easy target for someone bent on wrongdoing. Duncan likely saw his next victims, Shasta Groan, 8, and her brother Dylan, 9, playing outside the house in the unseasonably warm May weather as he drove past. Shasta and Dylan's mother, Brenda K. Groan, 40, came and went, as did Brenda's boyfriend, Mark Mackenzie, 37, and Shasta and Dylan's older brother, Slade, 13, throughout.
I'm going to let this play. I was going to skip through this, but there's a lot of you that didn't catch the first part, so I'm going to let you guys catch up on this. No, this is a very old story. This is an old death penalty case from the state of Idaho. It has been closed. The man is actually deceased at this time. He is not alive anymore. He died on death row from brain cancer. But this is a horrifying case. But I'm going to let it play through this so you guys have the rest of it. Thank you, Amberly. You're always so sweet to me. You guys are so kind. Hey, Devious, by the way. Christopher fan always. This story, yes, haunted so many people still to this day. And my heart goes out to Shasta. Shasta was 8 at the time, and she was the lone survivor in this story, which we'll get into.
The weekend of May 13th to 15th, before Duncan's arrival there. It was the type of community where parents were not afraid to leave their children alone.
Gosh.
It was the type of seemingly safe.
Cash, you're busting my balls already. Yes, deceased at this time, meaning current day, he's now deceased, not meaning hopefully he doesn't come back. God, Cash always busts my balls. It's okay, y'all.
Community where children played outside without parental supervision all the time, rode their bikes wherever they wanted, and built forts in the woods. Generally, kids there simply did all of the things that kids would normally do where they felt safe. But that was about to change. The grown Mackenzie home was sometimes visited by strangers whose vehicles broke down on the freeway. Their home was the first house anyone looking for help would see after getting off the freeway and on.
It's the only home out there. That's what I'm saying is you're not taking that exit. Oh, y'all are so sweet today. I don't know why. I don't look. Thank you. You guys are really sweet. But this is the only like visible home from the interstate. I remember we used to drive back and forth. I used to take Kenzie back and forth when I lived in Coeur d'Alene. Well, I lived in Post Falls, which was right outside of Coeur d'Alene, but I used to drive back and forth. Her dad lives right across on the Montana border side. So that was back and forth all the time. And that house stood out there and it was the only house there. The only way you're going out there is if you're going to dinner at the steakhouse, which you usually have to have reservations, and it's only open in the evening hours unless they open for lunch now, which I highly doubt. But it's just people have always said like, oh, there's no way he just randomly found. No way he randomly found these people. He was seeking his victims and guarantee he did see the kids playing out there. It's just a really crazy area. Christopher fan, always. Thank you so much. Let me find you. There we are. If you guys don't get it, they call me Mrs. Doubtfire too. If you're new over here, that's why we joke around with the Mrs. Doubtfire.
Onto Frontage Road. And according to later witness reports, the family was always happy to help a stranger in need. After having his interest heightened by the sight of the young children frolicking outside in the yard in what had been their safe surroundings, or walking or riding their bikes along Frontage Road, and occasionally motioning to passing truckers to honk their air horns of their semis, it is believed that Duncan reconnoitered the area for at least a day or two until he found the perfect vantage point where he could watch the kids and their family from a distance without being easily seen, using his night vision apparatus during the nighttime. While the exact time frame isn't known for certain, police believe that Duncan may have stalked the family for a few days after becoming comfortable with his surroundings, and had perhaps even followed them to town to watch them where they shopped before getting up the courage to make his move. On Sunday, May 15, 2005, the family drove into Coeur d'Alene to run errands, and then returned home where they enjoyed a barbecue.
It's Coeur d'Alene. That's how it's pronounced. It's spelt. It's French, I think is what it is. And it's pronounced Coeur d'Alene. We refer to it as CDA. It's just a thing. But listening to other people pronounce it, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get a twitch. Again, Northern Idaho.
Barbecue together with others. The gathering went into the early evening hours before it broke up and everyone went home. It was the last time that anyone would remember seeing Brenda and Slade grown and Mark Mackenzie alive. Early on Sunday, May 15th, according to a report that appeared in the Spokesman Review, before the family had left for Coeur d'Alene to go to the barbecue, a neighbor who lived nearby hired 13-year-old Slade Grown to mow the grass by his driveway. However, he didn't have the correct change to pay Slade the agreed-upon $10 for his work when he was finished, but assured the teenager that he would stop by his house and pay him the following day. When the neighbor showed up with his money on Monday, the house appeared eerily quiet. The neighbor honked his horn, but nobody came outside as they normally would have done when someone pulled into their driveway. Similarly, there was no response when he knocked on the door, and there were no lights visible inside the house. Only a dog barked from inside. The neighbor noticed that both of the family's cars were parked in their usual places, but the car doors had been left open. Suspicious, the neighbor rushed home and called 911. It was the second time in rough.
They left out in this one that he saw that the front door was closed, but the back door was ajar. So it was a little bit open, which out there, again, people don't lock their doors, anything like that. But the fact that nobody was coming to the door, the vehicles were all there, everything, he did call 911 and reported what he had seen. They initially thought they were going on a wellness check.
Roughly 24 hours that the neighbor had felt compelled to call the sheriff's department. The first call had been made to report a suspicious white pickup truck that had been parked near his barn and had apparently been abandoned. When deputies from the Kootenay County Sheriff's Department arrived at the small Frontage Road home at 6:15 p.m., everything appeared just as the neighbor had reported. After easily gaining entry to the home through a rear door to check on the residents' welfare, the deputies were aghast at the carnage they found inside. The perpetrator's point of entry appeared to have been a rear door that led into the kitchen, which had been left unlocked. There was blood everywhere, much of which was in puddles around two bodies that were sprawled on the floor. Both victims had been bound with duct tape and zip ties. The injuries appeared to have been centered around the head and face of each of the victims.
So they, for those of you that don't know, I don't know what detail he gives or not in this coming up. I can't remember, but they were bludgeoned to death with a framing hammer. So they all had injuries, which were significant. And the three that were found in the home were Mark McKenzie, Brenda Groney, and Brenda's middle son, Slade, the oldest of the three that were there, but he was her middle son. She had two others. But Slade, they were found spread out, duct taped together. So Slade was the first one that they found. His head was at his mom's feet, laid down. They were duct taped behind their back. He was only duct taped, to my understanding, but the rest were duct taped and zip tied. Hold on, let me see if he gets into this about the kids. He made the kids, the two youngest kids, he sent them outside, and they watched Slade run out the house. They heard the screaming and yelling. They watched Slade, injured, stumble out of the house, and Joseph Edward Duncan come out, start beating him in front of the two youngest, and drag him back in the house and finish killing him. Absolutely horrifying. And if they don't go into it in this, I will explain more.
Obviously, a young man or teenage boy and a middle-aged woman. It was difficult to determine upon initial examination whether the injuries were the result of blunt trauma or gunshot wounds. Blood splatters, the telltale signs of either mode of death, were...
And there was blood smeared throughout the entire home. The house is very secluded. Like, it is in the middle of nowhere. Literal nowhere. Right off the interstate. It's the only thing out there. But the house was covered. There was blood everywhere. Yes, you can see the house from the highway. Yep, you absolutely can. But you got to know what you're looking for. You got to actually know that there's something over there to even look, because if you blink, you're missing it. I grew up going to Wolf Lodge and those things, so I noticed, and we were used to this case. So you get used to looking at that stuff. But if you're randomly traveling through there, you blink and you miss it. And the neighbor was probably, that's hard to say because it's not blocks out there, within a mile, easily within a mile. I would probably say under a half a mile, the neighbor down the road.
Everywhere. And it would take a careful crime scene analysis to conclusively determine whether they had been beaten or shot, or both. The acrid smell of the congealed blood had become strong, and the sight and smell brought on a nauseous feeling to some of the less seasoned deputies. As the deputies made their way through the house, they encountered a third victim, also bound with duct tape and zip ties, in the living room.
So they make it sound like they were spread out, and actually they weren't. So they were laying head to feet. Let me draw you guys a diagram kind of thing. I don't think they show pictures in here. So Slade was laying, this is head, feet. Brenda, feet, head, and then Mark. So they were all very close by each other, just from the kitchen and the dining room. Here, let me show you. So they were like this. So Mark was laying face down this way. His feet, Brenda's head were at his feet. Same thing. Slade, his head was at Brenda's feet. So they were positioned one after another through the house. And Mark was pulled further into the foyer of the living room from the kitchen, if that makes sense.
There was also a significant amount of blood connected with the third victim, and it appeared that he, too, had died as a result of either a gunshot wound or blunt trauma to the head. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that each of the victims died horribly. As they reported their findings, the deputies believed that the victims in the kitchen were Brenda Groan and her 13-year-old son, Slade, and that the victim in the living room was Brenda's boyfriend, Mark McKenzie. There was no sign of 8-year-old Shasta Groan and her 9-year-old brother, Dylan. The deputies sealed off the house without removing or making positive identification of the bodies. And
They initially, so we watched this before. This is just a refresher. I was going to skip through this, but there's a lot of you that don't know anything about the story, so I'm just going to let it play. They initially didn't even realize that the kids were missing. They initially called the kids' dad because Brenda and Steve, her ex-husband, had just recently been divorced. Steve, her ex-husband, and the two oldest kids of theirs were actually living with Brenda's mom at the time of this crime. He was trying to get back on his feet, and so he was staying with Brenda's mom. So the first thing that happened is they were like, wait, where are the kids? They initially thought maybe they were with their dad, or then they realized, oh, okay, they're missing. So they started a ground search of the area and searched over 400 acres of vast wilderness. And then they issued an Amber Alert too, because they initially thought maybe they took off running during the crime. They had no idea what was all going on.
And they closed off frontage road in the vicinity of the house and designated it as a crime scene. They posted sentries to stand guard throughout the night and would return at first light with crime scene technicians and homicide investigators. Investigators, along with crime lab personnel, returned to the frontage road home at daybreak on Tuesday, May 17, 2005. Positive identification of the bodies soon confirmed the initial suspicions of the Kootenay County deputies. 3 homicides of the most violent nature had occurred, and the dead were indeed those who had been tentatively identified by the deputies who had initially found the bodies. Following lengthy examinations at the scene by Sheriff's Department detectives and crime lab technicians, the bodies of Brenda K. Groan.
Cash, why? So you can laugh at me? I can actually find the real pictures, but they were spread out. So hold on. They're spread out like Mark, living room, Brenda, Slade. Does that make sense? Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. So face first, laid out, head to feet, if that makes sense. Looking like a Rapunzel. You guys look goofy. All right. This Brenda, Mark, and Slade are the pictures you see on the screen. These were the 3 victims that were left in the house.
Slade Groan and Mark McKenzie were systematically removed from the house and taken to the county morgue. They believed that the victims had been killed sometime between Sunday night and the time their bodies were found on Monday. Meanwhile, volunteers with the Kootenay County Search and Rescue fanned out in all directions throughout the wooded areas that surrounded the Groan McKenzie home and Lake Coeur d'Alene in their search for Shasta and Dylan. Some searched on foot, others on horseback or all-terrain vehicles, and some used tracking dogs as well as dogs that had been specially trained to sniff out corpses as they traversed the woods and back roads throughout the area. A helicopter also searched from the air, and Idaho State Police, the ISP, as well as the Coeur d'Alene office of the FBI joined the search effort and canvassed the area, showing Shasta and Dylan's photos to area residents in the hopes that someone had seen them. An Amber Alert was issued nationwide for the 2 children. The Amber Alert described Dylan as 4.
This was in 2005. So the murder was, they say, late night the 15th into the early part of the 16th of May 16th, 2005.
Feet tall, 60 pounds, blue eyes, and blonde crew-cut hair. Shasta was described as 3 feet 10 inches tall, 40 pounds, with hazel eyes and long brown hair. Our main
I don't know if he necessarily positioned them, or is that's just where they ended up. I'm not sure if he actually positioned them that way, that's how they were laid. So it's not a very big house, if that makes sense. It's just the way it is, the kitchen, like I'll find the actual crime scene photos because they're on the internet. You can look at them. I don't know if he positioned them to be that way 100%, or if that's just how they ended up. But you'll hear more that you'll come to your own conclusion on that.
Concern right now are the 2 children we cannot find, Sheriff Rocky Watson told a gathering of reporters at a planned news conference. Looking into the victims' backgrounds, investigators learned that Brenda had married Stephen Groan at Big Bear Lake, California in 1986 and had 5 children together before divorcing in 2001. Following the divorce, she moved her family to Wolf Lodge, Idaho, and had lived there with Mark McKenzie ever since. Additional background information on Brenda showed that she had operated a business called Made to Order in which she cleaned houses on a work-for-hire basis. According to those who knew her, she would drop her children at a daycare and typically work all day cleaning other people's homes. However, she eventually got out of the house cleaning business so that she could spend more time with her children. Those who knew her described her as a good mother. Brenda wasn't a person without problems, however. She was on probation for possession of drug paraphernalia at the time of her death, and she had served jail time for the conviction on the aforementioned offense. She had also been ordered by the court to attend drug and alcohol counseling, but financial difficulties had prevented her from completing the programs. Another son, 18 years old, was in jail awaiting sentencing on burglary charges at the time of the murders.
So that is something that a lot of people don't understand about that area either, is the fact that that area is inundated with drugs. It is Spokane. People think little areas, well, thankfully more people understand now, but that area is inundated with meth. The meth has been for years horrible over there. It is very common to have a family, very functioning, normal on the outside appearance in that area, 5 kids, functioning addicts. Like, that's what I would make sure people understand here. And it's a lot of times family. Yeah, there's a lot.
One can only wonder if the same horrible fate that took the lives of the other members of his family would have befallen him too, had he not been in jail. Mark Mackenzie was described as an outdoors enthusiast who liked to spend some of his spare time hunting and fishing. He worked full-time at a job as a supervisor at a stainless steel sink manufacturing company in Spokane, Washington, located just across Idaho's western border. Both Brenda and Mark associated with bikers whose visits to their home sometimes gave way to partying. They appeared to be well-liked throughout the community, and no one that the police interviewed could understand how they could meet such a vicious end.
They were actually concerned at the time because of their involvement with motorcycle organizations, Steve, the ex-husband, and because of their lifestyle, that they were potentially victims of something from the motorcycle club. Because back then there was something about the hammer killings that I don't know much about that, but I guess that's a signature thing of some motorcycle gangs, is what they were initially investigating even. But then they were able to clear all of that and figure out that that wasn't the case. I'm not sure, because the whole house is filled with guns too. That's when they knew there wasn't a robbery also, because the weapons were all left in the home.
According to information released by the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department on Wednesday, May 18th, a person of interest surfaced in the case following interviews with relatives and friends of the victims. Robert Roy Lutner, 33, also known as Concrete Bob, a moniker he had been given because of his work in the concrete and construction industry, was a friend of the victims and had visited them twice in recent days, once on the Friday afternoon preceding the murders, and again on Sunday evening, which was believed to have been the day of the slayings. A relative of the Groans told detectives that Lutner owed Brenda Groan and Mark Mackenzie $2,000. However, the relative told the investigators that no one in the family had indicated that there might have been any trouble between them and Lutner, and there was no indication that he was being pressured to repay the money, even though the family needed it. "I never saw him hostile toward my family at all," the relative said, according to a news report in the Spokesman Review. Further,
It was the other son. It was the oldest son that had told investigators that he had borrowed money from his parents. He did. He borrowed $1,000 because his house was going into foreclosure. He too was on probation. He had left because his aunt had passed away in California. So he had looked to investigators like he was cutting out of town. So they initially, again, after investigating Steve, at the same time, they think this guy is running from them and he owes them money. And he had fingerprints on the scene because he was there the night before, hung out with this family, everything. Whole mess. But they had to track down every lead.
their investigation revealed that Lutner had been in trouble before, and in fact, his criminal record in the county was somewhat lengthy. He had been in trouble on drug possession charges in 1992, and had been arrested for domestic battery in 2004 in an incident outside a bar that involved a fight with a girlfriend. That charge had been eventually reduced to disturbing the peace. He was convicted twice for fraud for improperly representing unemployment claims and was currently on probation for those convictions. Lutner, at 6 foot 3 inches and weighing in at 230 pounds, was someone the cops definitely wanted to talk with. However, they had to find him first. He was seen at a bar in the area on Sunday afternoon, which would have been prior to being seen at Grown and Mackenzie's home. 2 days later, on Tuesday, he talked to his probation officer on the telephone and said that he was making a trip to Boise. By that time, he had heard about the murders and was crying while talking to a family friend of the victims, but the authorities were not yet looking for him as a person of interest in the case.
Who does this remind you of? Does that remind you of what happened in the Idaho 4 case? And they were using the guy that was in jail with the cut on his arm or whatever he had on his arm, and they were trying to make that guy fit the crime. Thankfully, these guys, opened up their perspective, because a lot of investigations seem to get cornholed into one single person and they don't look any further. Craziness.
That all changed, however, in a matter of hours after investigators pieced together the sequence of events that had placed Lutner at the Grown Mackenzie residence before the murders. The next day, Wednesday, May 18th, Lutner learned that the investigators were looking for him, and he turned himself in to the sheriff's deputies at Coeur d'Alene. He was interviewed over the next several hours and denied having anything to do with the murders. He took a polygraph and passed it with flying colors, and was subsequently dropped as a person of interest in the case, leaving investigators back at square one. After the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department established 2 phone lines for citizen tips about the brutal slayings and child disappearances, more than 150 calls were logged within the first 12 hours. Volunteers had come forward to answer the phones in the department's Emergency Operations Center, located in the basement of the Sheriff's Department headquarters building. 6 volunteers were on the phones around the clock, taking calls from concerned citizens, friends of the family, and an occasional psychic trying to help with a thoughtful lead about where Shasta and Dylan might be found. Some of the tips came from parents whose children had known Shasta and Dylan, and they...
We're going to speed it up because this is redundant that we already watched, but just so everybody's on the same field before we get into the next section, I'll just let it play through. Thank you, Amethyst, for clarifying that. I couldn't remember. I don't think they named an organization in any of the interviews that they said around this.
They provided outdoor locations where they had sometimes gone to play. However, none of the tips led anywhere immediately, or provided any information that might shed some light on why such a terrible thing had occurred in their peaceful county. Search dogs occasionally picked up Shasta's and Dylan's scent at various locations over a wide area of hills and lakefront acreage, and near area ponds and streams which were searched with the aid of diving teams, to no avail. There simply was no sign of the children. "We don't know if they're injured," Captain Ben Wolfinger told a reporter for the Spokesman Review. "We don't know if they're hiding out, if they're so scared that they're afraid to come out. We want to search every nook and cranny." Although the most viable leads were continuously passed on to the makeshift command post, consisting of a white trailer stationed near the crime scene, none of them panned out. As one day followed another, additional investigators from the FBI, as well as from other local agencies, joined in the murder investigation and the search for the missing children. The FBI also offered $100,000 in reward money for information leading to the safe return of the children and the capture of the person who abducted them. The case had quickly become the largest criminal investigation in Kootenai County's history. Even though he was looked at initially as a possible suspect, as husbands always are in any homicide investigation where a spouse or ex-spouse has met a violent end, Steve Grown, Brenda's ex-husband and Shasta's and Dylan's biological father, was quickly ruled out as a suspect in both the murder investigation as well as the missing children investigation. "Is he emotional already?" Wolfinger asked, as reported by the Spokesman Review. "Yeah." "Is he stressed?" "Yeah." "Is he beside himself with grief?" "Yeah." However, there's no evidence to substantiate Steve Grown as a suspect or a person of interest.
He actually made a statement to the media and said, pleaded with whoever had the kids. He was pleading with them and said they're not involved or something to that effect. And investigators instantly wait, involved in what? What are you talking about? And so they really amped up on Steve. But again, Steve was staying with Brenda's mom when this all happened with the 2 oldest children. Well, one was in jail, but the other one had been staying at her mom.
Steve Grown, accompanied by relatives and friends, made an emotional plea for the safe return of his children on national television on Thursday, May 19th. Please release my children safely," Grown said quietly, his voice hoarse from a lot of crying. "They had nothing to do with any of this.
There you go.
Release them in a safe area where law enforcement can find them. Call the helpline. Let them know where they can be found. 2 days later, America's Most Wanted ran a segment on its Saturday night, May 21st telecast, which resulted in 19 tips being called in to the sheriff's department shortly after the program aired. However, none of the tips provided much hope to the investigators that they would find the children anytime soon. The same day that Steve Groan had made his televised plea for the safe return of his children, Sheriff's Department investigators in the Kootenai County Coroner's Office released details of the official cause of death of the murder victims. According to the coroner's report, all 3 victims died from blunt trauma to the head. Each victim suffered skull fractures and contusions of the brain, and investigators believe that a claw hammer might have been the blunt instrument used on each of the bound victims. Following a toxicology analysis, tetrahydrocannabinol, also known as THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, was found in the blood of Brenda Groan and Mark McKenzie. Traces of methamphetamine were also found in their blood. Investigators claim that they still did not know whether the victims had been killed by one person acting alone or by more than one perpetrator. However, because each victim had been...
They definitely did think it was drug-related. 100%. They definitely thought it was drug-related to begin with, the connections, everything of that nature. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't think she would be here for us to know if... I hate to even know.
Bound. They theorized that it might have taken more than one person to subdue the victims and carry out the crimes. Meanwhile, a tip was phoned in by a sporting goods store owner in Bonners Ferry, Idaho, located about 70 miles north of Coeur d'Alene. The store owner said that a man and 2 children, a young boy and a young girl, came into his store. The man had asked for directions to Libby, Montana, after which the 3 left in a white van with Washington license plates. The store owner said that the children fit the descriptions of Shasta and Dylan. Deputies from Boundary County, as well as officers from the Idaho State Police, searched the main roads as well as the less traveled roads that ran from...
I gotta let you guys see this right quick, because this is the chaos that I deal with on the daily basis. Let me see if I can do it. Can you see the little lump right there? Beyond, right there, where Kiki's at? This right here. What you doing down there? They're sitting there fighting. All that little scratchy noise that you're hearing, that's them. They're sitting there like, I'm like, what in the hell is that noise coming from? Luna's under my bed and behind the blanket and keeps smacking Kiki from the other side. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Okay, sorry. This is the distraction of my house. Craziness.
From Bonners Ferry to Libby, Montana, but there was no sign of the van, the man, or the 2 children. As the investigation continued, the cops were still no closer to determining a motive for the crime than they were to finding the children. Drugs, or a drug deal gone bad, had been discussed as one possible motive, except that the house on Frontage Road didn't contain evidence of drugs or of a methamphetamine lab, which were scattered here and there throughout the Pacific Northwest, despite the fact that marijuana and methamphetamine were found in Brenda and Mark's blood during their autopsies. To the cops, it looked more like they had just been recreational users and had likely used the drugs during the Sunday barbecue. There was even some talk among the investigators that the killings may have been gang-related, prompting them to bring in a gang unit from Spokane to go over and study the crime scene. But after all was said and done, there was no indication that the crime was gang-related. So, who killed Brenda and Slade Groan and Mark McKenzie and kidnapped Shasta and Dylan Groan? And why? Were the children even still alive? At this point, it appears that there would be no easy answers to these questions and many others, and it seemed that any semblance of answers would not be forthcoming anytime soon. Investigators, as well as family members, held out hope that Shasta and Dylan were still alive. DNA tests on blood taken from the crime scene showed that the blood belonged to the 3 murder victims, and that Shasta's and Dylan's blood appeared to be absent.
Look how remote that is. Now you look and tell me, do you see neighbors anywhere? It's beautiful area. Again, that's a beautiful, beautiful area, but it's just not. You had to know, he had to have seen the kids and pulled off.
From the crime scene. Meanwhile, as time slipped forward, investigators hoping to find clues that would help unravel the mystery of what happened, not only about the murders on Frontage Road, but to what had happened to Shasta and Dylan, began sifting through tons of garbage from the area's public landfills and dumpsters in and around Wolf Lodge. They hoped to find clues such as bloody clothing that the killer may have discarded, or even the murder weapon itself. But after sorting through tons of refuse, clues to what happened and why remained elusive. As the days turned into weeks, it began to seem as if Shasta and Dylan had simply disappeared from the face of the earth, never to be seen again. Then, on Saturday, July 2nd, at about 1:30 a.m., and 48 days after the case had begun, the unexpected happened. A middle-aged man driving a...
All right, I'm going to slow it down here so you guys can listen, because this is where we're picking up the piece of it that we...
Red Jeep Cherokee with Missouri license plates turned into the parking lot of the Coeur d'Alene Denny's restaurant, located north of Interstate 90, and parked. He exited the vehicle, along with a little girl. They walked into the 24-hour establishment, passing by 2 young men who were standing outside smoking cigarettes. In almost a state of shock, one of the young men recognized the little girl as Shasta Groan. He had no doubt that it was Shasta. He had passed a billboard with a photo of her and her brother, Dylan, earlier that evening. But where was Dylan? There was no sign of him. Nonetheless, the young man alerted his girlfriend inside via his cellular phone about what he had just seen. Afterward, he alerted Denny's employees as well, but
Denny's is right off the Interstate 2, off of Interstate 90. So he left the area with the kids May 16th and came back to the area. And stopped. I don't know if he was like tempting fate and thought he could get away with it. Nobody would recognize. There was billboards. The kids' faces were plastered from Washington, Idaho, Montana. You couldn't go anywhere without seeing their faces all over the news, all over billboards, the entire interstate. It was everywhere. Thankfully, media did an excellent job and law enforcement kept their faces in the news. They put them everywhere. I've never seen a response like they did ever. Not ever in my life since that time have I ever seen anything like that. They did an incredible job.
waitress had already recognized Shasta by that time and had told her shift manager. The manager subsequently called 911 at 1:51 a.m., and approximately 10 minutes later, 3 police cars arrived at the restaurant, their lights turned off.
Angel, me too. Kootenai County, all of it. Coeur d'Alene. Oh, I was like, ugh. And isn't it? He's saying growing, whatever. It's groany. Like, but a lot of people do that. I don't know how they pronounced it.
The man with the girl, believed to be Shasta, apparently saw the police cruisers as they turned into Denny's parking lot because he immediately got up from his table, told a waitress that he needed his check, and headed toward the restrooms with a little girl. When the man returned a few minutes later, several officers surrounded him and escorted him outside. Another officer spoke to the little girl, and she told him that her name was Shasta Grown. Shasta said that she wanted her daddy and that she wanted to go home. Outside, shining their flashlights into the windows of the red Jeep, the police officers saw no sign of Dylan, dashing their hopes that he was still alive. Shasta, who appeared to be in good physical health, was taken to a local hospital for examination and observation, where she remained for the next.
Yeah, they'll get to all of that. The poor baby. Yeah, and the brother too. Hopefully they cover it
next couple of days.
easily.
She was eventually reunited with her father after he traveled from Seattle to Coeur d'Alene to be with her.
Oh my goodness.
The man with Shasta was identified shortly after his arrest as Joseph Edward Duncan III, a 42-year-old ex-fugitive sex offender from Fargo, North Dakota. He would initially be charged with 2 counts of first-degree kidnapping, for which the maximum penalty in Idaho is death or life in prison. Additional charges would come later, as the evidence warranted, including, initially, 3 counts of first-degree murder. In building their background on Duncan, investigators learned that he was.
We're going to watch the updates with Shasta. That's why I was wanting you guys to hear the background of this part of it. Yeah, it's very bad. What happened to Dylan is very bad. She witnessed all of it. She's the reason this case, he was able to be found and everything. And the pain and suffering she has gone through is incredible. She has done a few interviews in the past few years, and we will actually watch those today. It's horrifying. She's been through so much.
Was born on February 25th, 1963, in Tacoma, Washington, where he was also raised. His first run-in with the law occurred in 1978 when he was 15 years old. In that incident, he forced a 9-year-old boy at gunpoint, and the following year he was arrested driving a stolen car.
15. Look at this. Look at this picture right here. This is unbelievable to me to see a photo like this where it says sex offender across the top in the RCWs for Washington State. But look at this. Like, if this doesn't say a lot, I don't know. It bothers me so bad. He's such a young kid.
He was sentenced as a juvenile and sent to Dislin's Boys Ranch in Tacoma, where he told a therapist who was assigned to his case that he had bound and forced 6 boys, according to a report by the Associated Press. He also told the therapist that he estimated that he had forced 13 younger boys by the time he was 16. In 1980,
so they said 16 in this one. we know for sure it was 17, no matter what. But 13 by 16 or 17. 13 victims by 16 or 17.
Duncan was sentenced to 20 years in prison for forcing a 14-year-old boy at gunpoint. 14 years later, he was paroled on the condition that he have no contact with minor children and was sent to a halfway house in Seattle so that he could eventually hope.
His dad was military too, for those of you that don't know. He was raised by his mom, but his dad was military. They moved around, military family. He's got sisters, 2 older sisters, and a younger brother. Hold on, let me look at my notes. I have it written down.
Fully returned to society as a productive citizen. It didn't appear that he was capable of going straight, however, and any hope of him returning to society as a normal citizen quickly vanished. He violated his parole in 1996 by using marijuana and getting caught, and for possession of a firearm. He was sent to jail for 30 days and then released. During that same time frame, in July 1996, Sammy Jo White, 11, and Carmen Cubias, 9, half-sisters from Seattle, were last seen leaving a motel room near downtown where they had been staying. Their bodies were found nearly 2 years later, in February 1998. Although Duncan wasn't viewed as a suspect in their disappearances and deaths at that time, given the circumstances surrounding the Shasta and Dylan Groen case, his background and movements would be carefully scrutinized in that case and others. Deborah Palmer, 7 years old, was last seen walking to school in Oak Harbor, Washington on March 26, 1997. Her body washed up on a beach 5 days later. Duncan would also be looked at in that case to determine whether he could be linked to Deborah's disappearance and death. Duncan, on March 31, 1997, the date that Deborah's body was found, stole his girlfriend's car and disappeared. While sitting in jail in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, following
Coeur d'Alene.
His arrest in connection with the Wolf Lodge murders and
this story is horrible too. This is Anthony Martinez.
Child abductions, Duncan was quickly connected with the unsolved disappearance and death of 10-year-old Anthony Martinez of Beaumont, California, during an interview with FBI agents, according to Globe magazine. Agents were questioning him about his possible involvement in other cases that were similar to the Groen case, and he purportedly told them about the Martinez boy in Riverside County in Southern California, where he had apparently fled after stealing his girlfriend's car in Washington. He was visiting his father in Highland, California, only 22 miles from Beaumont, at the time Martinez disappeared. Anthony Martinez disappeared on April 4, 1997, while playing with his younger brother and several friends in an alley behind their home. A man apparently approached the boys and offered them money to help them find his lost cat. He first went after Anthony's brother, but that boy got away, Beaumont Police Lieutenant Mitch White told Globe magazine. He got Anthony.
Can you imagine the survivor's guilt Anthony's brother too feels? Like, that's the problem with all of these. There's so many victims, but the ripple effect, the survivor's guilt, the ones that, what a monster.
According to Anthony's brother, as related by Lieutenant White, the man threatened Anthony with a knife and forced him into a white 1986 Chrysler New Yorker sedan and drove away. Anthony's bound, naked body was found 15 days later, on April 19th, in a shallow grave. Duncan's partial right thumbprint found on duct tape from Anthony's body nearly 9 years later was determined to be Duncan's. A wanted poster.
Duct tape is definitely one of his signature things.
That was circulated in Southern California at the time of Anthony's death depicted a suspect that bore a striking resemblance to Duncan. By August 27, 1997, Duncan had made his way to his half-sister's house in Kansas City, Missouri, where he was arrested for parole violations. He was returned to Washington and sent back to prison, but was released less than 3 years later. On July 21, 2000, Duncan moved to Fargo, North Dakota. Realizing that they were dealing with a probable serial killer, the cops found themselves wondering why Duncan had ever been released from prison.
Listen to this. This drives me absolutely bonkers. They thought that they possibly might be dealing with something, and here we are. How many times has he been let out? How many victims did he have through all of those years and should have never been let out to begin with?
He was clearly an example of a habitual offender who had managed to slip through the cracks of the system. According to the details that Shasta recounted to Kootenai County Detective Dan Matos, contained in court records from a probable cause hearing held on Tuesday, July 5, 2005, Shasta was asleep in her bedroom the night that her family was killed. Her mother came into her room, woke her up, and led her into the living room where she first saw Duncan. According to court records, Duncan carried Shasta and her brother outside and placed them inside a pickup truck and drove them to a location where he had parked the red Jeep Cherokee. Then he placed the children inside the Jeep and drove them to a campsite deep in the forests of western Montana. Over the next several weeks, according to Shasta, he repeatedly forced both of the children. She told Matos that Duncan had acted alone. She also said that she had called Duncan Jet, a nickname of his own device, Joseph Edward III. According to a report in USA Today, Shasta recalled vividly the smallest details of the night that her family was killed and she and her brother abducted. Shasta told the investigators that Duncan wore dark gloves inside the house and carried a shoulder-style weapon, such as a shotgun. During a search of the stolen Jeep, investigators found dark gloves, a 12-gauge shotgun, and a red shotgun shell. She even recalled the brand name of the claw hammer that Duncan allegedly used to kill her family, a Fat Max. Although Shasta said that she...
Oops, sorry, I was muted. Think of the detail that she was able to remember. Think about that. Kiki, stop. Absolute insanity for an 8-year-old to be able to remember those details. Horrifying, but amazing too.
She and her brother had not witnessed the actual murders. She explained how Duncan had shown her and her brother the Fat Max hammer and how he told them that he had used it to kill her family. According to Kootenai County Sheriff's Detective Brat Maskell, investigators purchased a Fat Max brand hammer and were able to match the tool markings on it to the wounds on victims' skulls. Shasta also explained to the investigators how Duncan had said that he used the night vision goggles to watch the grown Mackenzie home for 2 or 3 nights before the murders and abductions. Police also found night vision goggles in the stolen Jeep. Shasta also stated that Duncan had told her sordid details of how he had forced her brother. He had even tortured him, burning him with cigarettes. Based on Shasta's statements, investigators were able to locate the remote Montana campsite where Duncan had allegedly held Shasta and her brother captive. A short time later, authorities sadly announced that they believed that they had found Dylan's remains off a remote Forest Service road in Montana's Bitterroot Mountains. A week later, forensic DNA testing confirmed
he was actually found in the Lolo National Forest, which is the Bitterroot Valley. That's where a lot of us over here lived at one point.
that the remains were indeed Dylan's. The authorities announced that he had been shot to death and that his body had been burned. It was also revealed by the Pacific Northwest Inlander, a free weekly magazine published in Spokane, Washington, that a video camcorder was recovered from the stolen Jeep. The camcorder contained a video of Duncan forcing Shasta and Dylan, as well as threatening to kill them. Shasta told investigators that
I hope you guys are understanding what they're saying by forcing. They're leaving out details, but hopefully you guys are understanding. He sexually assaulted them over and over and over again. And then
Duncan had shown her some of the digital pictures. Prosecutors successfully argued that the video should not be copied for the defense out of fear that during the process, they could fall into the wrong hands and get leaked to the public and make their way onto the internet. Prosecutors indicated that Duncan may also be charged with the production of minor-attracted people pornography, but it was not clear whether those charges, if they materialize, would be a result of the digital videos taken of himself, Shasta, and Dylan, or if those charges would be unrelated to the Groan case. Following Duncan's arrest, it was discovered that he had been keeping an internet diary of sorts, a weblog, commonly referred
there you go. I knew it was talked about in one of these, but I couldn't remember which one. And here you go.
to as a blog, in which he disturbingly implied that he had left a string of bodies following his release from prison. "I got out and I got even," wrote Duncan in his blog, "but I did not get caught. So I got even again and again and did not get caught. I got even twice, actually more." Duncan also wrote of keeping a second diary, a secret diary written in code that provided more details of his horrible crimes. "The world will know who I really was and what I really did," he wrote. I am scared, alone, and confused, and my reaction is to strike out toward the perceived source of my misery, society. My intent is to harm society as much as I can, then die. Duncan's writings were voluminous and could easily fill a book. He also had an affinity for dressing in drag, and at one point in his life, he posted a series of such photos of himself on the internet and labeled them Jazzy Jet as an example of how he apparently views himself. Duncan's trial date was originally slated to begin on January 17, 2006. However, according to the November 23, 2005 edition of the Seattle Times, First District Judge Fred Gibler vacated the January date and pushed his trial date back to April 4, 2006, in response to defense attorneys' requests for more time to prepare for trial. Sex offender, minor attracted individual, kidnapper, and murderer Joseph Edward Duncan III, through his lawyers, worked out a deal with Idaho prosecutors just as his trial was about to begin in October 2006 for crimes he committed in that state. As a result of the deal, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and to 3 counts of first-degree kidnapping in the murders of Brenda and Slade Groen and Mark McKenzie, and for the abductions of Shasta and Dylan Groen. In October 2006, before jury selection could be completed, Duncan worked out a stipulated agreement through his attorney in which he described how he had stalked his victim's family for 2 days after choosing them at random, after seeing young Shasta playing outside her home in a bathing suit. Duncan had then taken Shasta and Dylan deep into the Lolo National Forest, where he tortured them for weeks. He tortured and hung Dylan during the horrendous ordeal, eventually murdering the boy and disposing of his remains in the forest. This agreement was...
What happened was he accidentally shot Dylan with a shotgun. And Dylan was in pain, of course, and crying. So he got up and he walked over and he shot him in the head with a shotgun right in front of Shasta. That's the actual what happened, and that has been detailed extensively. But I don't know if that happened before and he let him down. That's a detail I'm kind of iffy on there.
Was made possible because of a brave little 9-year-old girl who was willing to confront Duncan face-to-face in the courtroom, Kootenai County Prosecutor Bill Douglas said. A lot of hard work went into this. After the guilty pleas were accepted, Duncan was allowed to make a statement. I've thought a lot about what I wanted to say, Duncan said. I have nothing to say. Duncan showed no remorse throughout the proceedings. By the terms of Duncan's stipulated deal with Ohio prosecutors, he was required to cooperate with Kootenai County investigators in the murder and kidnapping aspects of the cases involving Shasta and Dylan. It was agreed that his guilty pleas could not be withdrawn, and if he was not convicted in similar pending cases in federal court, the state of Idaho could hold a death sentence trial in which Shasta would not be required to testify. Duncan was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences.
She has given detailed interviews with investigators, but she didn't have to sit on the stand. So that was what they were trying to do, is not have to put her in the same room with him again. That's what they were attempting to do by that. But she gave detailed interviews with investigators repeatedly. And she's the reason why this case.
Without the possibility of parole, pending the outcome of the federal cases against him.
He was going to get rid of her too. In fact, she talks about this and we listened to it in the last one. The last one gave a lot more detail about the actual incidents, but the reason why she thinks she was okay or survived is because he was trying to get rid of her, but she used his name, the nickname that he had told them about. And for some reason, he stopped, and that's how she ended up being found.
According to KTLA News, Duncan was convicted of the murders and kidnappings a year later in federal court after prosecutors showed jurors videos that Duncan had made in which the torture of Dylan, including Dylan being hanged until unconscious and near death before being revived, were monstrously recorded. The federal jury also heard that Duncan shot Dylan point blank in the head while his sister, Shasta, watched in horror. Duncan received 3 death sentences in federal court, as well as 9 life terms under varying charges for the murders of 4 members of the family and the kidnapping of Shasta and Dylan. Earlier, when Duncan had agreed to speak with FBI agents during the initial investigation, he had mentioned 10-year-old Anthony Martinez's name. Aware of the Martinez case and very interested, the FBI agents contacted Riverside County Sheriff Bob Doyle in California. It was a situation where they were asking him about his involvement in any other similar case, Doyle told a reporter with the National Enquirer. He said, "Yeah, this boy Martinez in Southern California, Riverside County. It was not a full, blown-out confession, though. The FBI asked us if we knew anything about a Martinez case. I said, we sure do. We've been trying to solve the murder for years, and we've gone through 15,000 leads. So when we were able to match a partial thumbprint on duct tape found near Anthony's body with that of Duncan, we knew we had our man." Doyle initially had sent investigators to the Kootenai County Jail in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, to interview Duncan, but he refused to speak with them. "We haven't changed him yet, but we intend to carry out further investigations," Doyle said after the 2006 attempt to interview Duncan, "and we're certainly looking to interview him again." Anthony Martinez's mother, upon learning of the circumstances of Duncan's parole after serving only 14 years of a 20-year sentence that had allowed him to commit such savagery upon the Grown and Mackenzie families and to murder her young son, was outraged. "How do you get out for good behavior?" she asked. "Someone like that can't be rehabilitated. I don't care what psychologists say." After linking Duncan to Anthony Martinez's death, the FBI began looking into the possibility that there might be other murders that could be linked to Duncan that had remained unsolved throughout the years. For all they knew, there could be many.
All right, hold on. The cat rats are at it again. Ready? See that lump right there under the blanket? Sorry. This is what I try to do. This is why it's so hard for me to keep concentrated. What in the heck is going on with these rats today? Cash, they're coming to you. They're a mess. Look at her going crazy under here. What you doing? What you doing, pretty girl? Okay. Oh, he is. Yeah, he's dead. He died on death row. He died on death row of brain cancer. He actually refused to get radiation or chemo. So he had a very aggressive form of brain cancer. Look at that. I mean, they're just being ridiculous, though. They're having so much fun. What are you guys doing over there? Intermission. Kiki in the show. What you doing under there? Can you see her? There's Luna. She's like, put it back down, Mom. All right, back to the story at hand.
According to retired Lieutenant Mitch White, the lead investigator in the Martinez case who spoke with KPSP News, the search for Anthony had been a race against time in hopes of finding the boy alive after learning of his kidnapping.
Okay, one more time. Look at this look at Kiki. He's now sitting on the blanket so she can't get out. He's now blocked her.
At knife point in the alley behind his house. He said that there had been more than 60 investigators each day working on the case in the field, following up on leads, at least until his body was found down in Indio. When his body was found, it was like letting the air out of a balloon, White said. I mean, everyone was deflated. A lot of people were angry that it hadn't worked out the way they hoped it would. Once Anthony was found, investigators moved down to Indio and continued for a few months after that with a huge investigation. Anthony had been missing for 15 days when his body was found in a remote area south of Joshua Tree National Monument in Indio, bound with duct tape, tortured, and then beaten to death. During the March 15, 2011 hearing, in which Duncan pleaded guilty to murdering Anthony Martinez, Supervising Deputy District Attorney Otis Sterling read a document apparently written by Duncan to the court, using it to provide a factual basis for accepting Duncan's guilty plea. According to Sterling's reading of the document, Duncan admitted that he had lured a group of boys to help him find a lost cat by offering them $1 each. At some point, he pulled out a knife and forced Anthony into the car he was driving and transported him some 50 miles to the remote desert area near Indio where his body was found.
Paid them $1 in order to get their trust to kidnap one. Can you imagine this? Like, what? This man was an absolute horror.
Sterling read that Duncan had forcibly removed all of Anthony's clothing and admitted that he bound Anthony with duct tape before hitting him on the head with a rock, killing the boy. Sterling also said that Duncan's intention was to exact revenge on society. I've lived with this case for 3 years, Sterling said. I wanted to make sure when Duncan came to California, I could do everything I could possibly do to make sure he was convicted. I spent many nights crying. Just the thought of someone taking a child from where they were playing and doing what Joseph Duncan did, there is no other word to describe that than to say it is evil. Probably evil in its purest form. At Duncan's sentencing hearing for the Anthony Martinez murder on April 4, 2011, Zellerbach said that he wouldn't have considered a deal with Duncan if Duncan had not already been sentenced to death in federal court. As a prosecutor, I handled 50 murder cases and 35 death penalty cases, Zellerbach said. I presided as a judge over 7 death cases and sentenced 5 people to death. I've sentenced some of the worst child killers, and Mr. Duncan ranks right up there in the top 3. Anthony's mother, Diana Reed, spoke at the hearing and said that she gave birth to Anthony when she was 16, and that she did not want Duncan to know the extent of the pain his actions had caused her and her family. I was not going to allow him to steal that from me.
They're absolutely destroyed, as you can imagine. This has absolutely changed everybody's lives around it.
Reed said. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life letting him know what he had done to us. I don't think he deserves to even know. He might have been able to take Tony physically. He would never be able to take away the love that we've had. He was like my buddy. He was always there. We kind of grew up together. I wanted so much for him. We're ready for a conclusion, ready for it to be done. It won't ever be closed, but it's over. And we can now, mourn Tony's death the way we should have in the beginning. When we buried him, we didn't know who did it. And the Riverside County Sheriff and Beaumont Police, they never forgot, and will be eternally grateful to all the departments involved. Reed said that she pities Duncan and that she views him as less than human. I find it incomprehensible that someone who can be categorized as human, the same as I, could do the things he has done, she said, as reported by Fox News. I don't consider him a person. Duncan sat quietly throughout the proceeding, his eyes closed much of the time. When his eyes were open, he stared mostly straight ahead and would not look at Reed or Anthony's father, Ernesto Martinez, or at any other family members and friends. He will endure for eternity pain and suffering that no humankind can comprehend, Martinez said of Duncan in an emotional statement to the court. I'm angry that instead of attending my son's college graduation, I'm spending the day at the sentencing for Tony's murderer. As a father, I would love nothing more than to carry out Joseph Duncan's execution with my own 2 hands. Following the sentencing hearing, Joseph Edward Duncan III, shackled in chains with his arms crossed in front of him, was sentenced by Judge Downing to 2 consecutive life prison terms without the possibility of parole in the Anthony Martinez case. I can say in my 31 years being involved in the criminal justice system, I've never met a more evil person than Joseph Duncan, Downing.
He absolutely had zero remorse for any of his crimes. None. And he details that in his blog. Like the writings, this man absolutely enjoyed what he has done. Revenge on society. And the sad part about this, at the time when the Martinez family was hopefully getting justice for Anthony, it was causing issues, or the family, the surviving family that was going through all the pain and suffering in Idaho from the Groney case, they were having a hard time understanding and hoping that the Anthony Martinez situation wouldn't hold up his potential sentence in Idaho. So Steve the father of Shasta, was having a really hard time. And there was a lot of back and forth going on because everybody was hurting and they wanted justice, but it was a mess. It was an absolute mess.
Said. In addition to Duncan's 3 death sentences, the 2 life terms meted by Downing brought Duncan's total life sentences to 11. The sentence was,
Y'all, we have a case right now. Right now, there's a case. Her name is Sarah, and her 15, well, he was 15 at the time when he went missing, out of, let me tell you where they're out of. I was looking at it last night. Hold on. We're going to talk about it. They're still missing. There was absolutely foul play involved. Susie and Evan, they are from I always want to get this wrong. Deatsville, Alabama. They're from Hopeville, Alabama. They went missing in 2017. 2017, he was 14 years old. And his mom. And highly suspected foul play. They have it all linked up. She had married a guy, all of this stuff. We're going to get into that case too. But y'all, we have so many kids that are actually missing today in similar situations as this that nobody talks about. That nobody's talking about these stories. They only talk about the ones that they can sensationalize and put in the headlines and get clicks and views off. What about all these other kids that are missing? This is a horror story that I wanted to remind people of because so many people didn't even know about this one.
Part, the result of several special circumstance allegations, including kidnapping, torture, and having been convicted of prior murders being considered. It would be ridiculous.
Revival, that's a good question. I wonder how many. I'm going to look right now.
Ridiculous to even attempt to think that in any way, shape, or form that he had any type of remorse, Anthony's mother said after the sentence was passed. Downing ordered Duncan removed from the courtroom and sent back to the maximum security federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, where he will eventually be executed. According to the plea deal in California, Duncan waived his right to appeal his conviction in that state and was ordered to pay $7,000 to Anthony's family to cover the costs of the child's funeral. The jurors who imposed the death penalty on Duncan were offered counseling for them to cope with the horrific evidence that they had to see during the trial. Part of the evidence viewed in court was a 33-minute video depicting a nude Duncan torturing, physically and verbally assaulting a nude and restrained boy identified as Dylan Groan. The video showed this abuse conducted in various interior areas of what appeared to be a dilapidated, single-level wooden shed or small cabin. Other evidence included human remains, a noose wire from the cabin interior, and other videos of Duncan's.
Who does he remind you guys of right there? I want to hear what you guys say. Those eyes are just deadpan. They are so bad. Yeah, that's a good question. I am Charles Scott Robinson, got 30,000 years. Oklahoma child rapist. Charles Scott Robinson owns the longest record. Alan Wayne McLaurin, 21,250 years out of Oklahoma. Oklahoma. Alabama, Dudley Wayne Kaiser, 10,000 years. James Egan Holmes, 12 life sentences and 3,318 years without parole in Colorado. And Bobby Joe Long from Florida was given 28 life sentences and an additional 99 years of imprisonment and a death sentence for raping over 50 women and killing more than 25 of them. That's the top 5. Manson. That's exactly, I was like, the long hair. Holy shit.
Continued torture of Dylan.
Charlie.
During one of those videos, a child could be heard screaming in pain while a naked Duncan shouted, "The devil is here, boy. The devil himself. The devil likes to watch children suffer and cry." In 2016, Shasta Groan, then 19 years old, started a petition called Slade and Dylan's Law in honor of her 2 brothers whom Duncan murdered. In the petition description, she stated that convicted sex offenders should not be let out of jail. This would effectively mean that the 3-strike rule for violent sex offenders would be reduced to 1 strike. By the time the petition closed, it had 51,820 supporters. In October 2020, Duncan underwent brain surgery after he was diagnosed with glioblastoma. He declined any treatment and rejected chemotherapy and radiation therapy. Medical staff at the Federal Bureau of Prisons estimated he had between 6 and 12 months to live. He died on March 28th 2021, at the age of 58. His body was cremated.
All right, there's that part of it. Hold on, I'm going to stop that screen. Ooh, look at me. We're going to watch an interview with Shasta now. Buckle up, y'all, because this is hard. It's hard to listen to this. So we're going to watch, which one's which? Hold on just a moment. Let me make sure I got them in order. This is from a year ago. And this one, give me 1 second. I got to make sure I have them in order. And this one's 9 months ago. Okay, perfect. Got them. Got which ones I want. All right, we're going to start with this one. So this is from KTVB. I'm going to share it just a second. This is Shasta Groney, who was the lone survivor from that story. Now, Anthony Martinez's brother, you could consider him a survivor too, because he was one that also, she looks a lot different than this interview, but this is one of the first ones, and then we're going to go into the more recent one. All right, let's go. And please be mindful. She has been through a lot, and she has had a lot of things in her own life. She actually went missing for a period of time as an adult too. This has been really difficult on people far and wide.
10 years. So if you can you take us back to when you were discovered at the Denny?
This was her 10-year interview after the incident. So this would have been in 2015 that it was actually, the interview was done.
And if you remember anything, I mean, you were only 8 years old, but do you remember that feeling of I'm safe?
I do remember that feeling of I'm safe, but at the same time, it was just, I think I was so focused, well, sad about my family, but so focused on, you know, where are my oldest brothers or where's my dad, and, you know, just stuff like that. I was happy to be in a safe place, but there was still that part of me that's like, well, what if this happens again?
Do you remember when you were spotted? Do you remember that moment? Do you remember when someone said, are you?
That's got to be a dog in the video. It's not one of mine.
What happened?
Well, the cop came up to us and he asked me what my name was. And I remember feeling really scared to say anything. I remember looking at Joseph Duncan for like a, almost like a permission to answer the question. Yeah, I was just really scared.
Did he give you that permission?
Well, when I had looked over at him, he kind of like nodded his head, like, yeah, go ahead. You know, because I think that everyone knew who I was. It was just a matter of getting that confirmation that it was.
Do you think he wanted you to be rescued?
Sometimes, like, I do think about it, and sometimes I don't know if he would necessarily be that nice to, you know, do that for me. But at the same time, I think that he brought me to so many public places for a reason. I don't know, you know, what was going through his head or what, but I think that him bringing me to public places, there was a reason for it.
Yeah, I think you're right. So let's talk about the next few years. You were just 8, so you had a lot to overcome. What were those next few months like with your dad? Did you get the help you needed? Do you remember it all? I mean, you were so little.
I remember not being in school for a while. I remember kind of just not being able to really watch TV because my dad wanted to protect me from what was on there, and he didn't want me to have to see Duncan again. But I do remember it was just everyone wanted to love on me and just be there with me, and it was just, I think it was just like a time for my family to get back to not normal, because things could never really be normal after that, but just kind of get back into emotion of we need to move on with our lives and, you know, start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So during that time, did you get the help you needed in terms of, did you see a counselor? Did you get to talk about it? Did you talk about it with Dad? How did you let that all out? Or could you even at that time?
I did. I was seeing a counselor that I really, really loved, but that came to an end when she was telling people outside of our sessions what was going on in the sessions.
Oh,
Think about that. Think about that. Like there's so much horror with this. Hey, Sassy Nana. Think about that, though. This girl has been through a traumatic experience as is. And then the very therapist that she goes to and confides in about what's going on releases the information publicly. Like, how much disappointment has this kid endured? That blows my mind.
And so my dad didn't want me to talk to her anymore. He was worried about me and what could happen for me if things like that did get out. So,
and I have to say too, her dad, granted, nobody could have handled this the right way, but Steve's a very different personality to begin with. He had a very different personality. So the way that he tried to manage things after, again, not right or wrong, but all of them needed support. All of them needed so much more help. This was such a horrifying story for all of them. Yeah, she absolutely has needed support her entire life. She lost her mom, her brother, her basically mom's live-in boyfriend, stepdad, her little brother, she watched murdered. Like, she had no one. I don't even know if she still does at this point in time. This would have been 2015. This was 10 years after the incident. So she would have been 18. 2015. This is 10 years after. This was the 10-year. Then there's another one that we're going to watch after this.
I went to another person, and then after that, I was just kind of like, I'm so tired of talking about it, and I'm so tired of having to relive it. I just wanted to focus mainly on what the rest of my life was going to be. I was a very future-oriented person. I hated looking back on my past.
already?
Yeah.
So tell me, did you feel like you had the support you needed in that community? Did you get the support that you think you needed looking back?
No, Joseph Edward Duncan died on death row, not from being put to death, but he died of brain cancer on death row. This has been solved. This one is 100% solved, closed case.
Yeah, I definitely do. And if it wasn't something that my family could do for me, my family would reach out and other people would, step in and help us, which I appreciated a lot, because there wasn't ever a time that I was really alone or, and that always made me feel better just being around other people and just feeling like I had that sense of security.
Absolutely. Now, after you were rescued, was there a debriefing time where you had to speak with investigators quite a bit? Do you recall any of that?
Yeah, I remember the night that they had found me, they took me into a back room and I was sitting on a chair and they were just asking me questions, and I would close my eyes and be like, I'm thinking, but I'd really be sleeping. I was super tired and just exhausted, and I didn't even really want to answer the questions. I just wanted to sleep, and I wanted them to do it a different time, but it was so set on like, we need to get answers tonight so that we can move forward with what we need to do tomorrow. And so I do remember that whole entire interview that I did with the cops.
I guess a lot of people would wonder, do you remember what happened during that time? We're not going to talk about it, but do you remember it? Is it still vivid? Or I think people are hoping, I hope she's forgotten a lot of that. What would you say to those people?
Well, I think that things that happen like that, you can't really forget about them. I think that the images will always be vivid in your mind. Or I know that they are in my mind.
This is what I want people to understand too, because we hear so much stuff about specifically the Idaho 4 case right now. They talk about how the roommate and all of this stuff. Think about the trauma that actually goes on in these moments. Your brain has a way of protecting yourself no matter what. Some people don't understand that the brain has ways of shutting off and shutting down, just like the roommate in Idaho. This poor girl saw things that I don't think will ever be able to come out of her mouth, because that's the body's reaction to trauma. It will try to protect until it can't anymore. So as this little girl's life has unfolded, can you imagine all of the different things that she has had to remember, and all of the different things that, this interviewer was terrible. Absolutely. Interviewer was horrible. The questions that they asked this girl, and then we look at this little girl. Well, she's an adult now. She's a mom. And we expect her to be okay. We expect her to be okay. This girl has dealt with addiction herself, all sorts of things. But looking at this, All of the people around her, I just want to smack every single one of them. Smack them. It is absolutely disgusting. That's why that personal friend of mine, her dad stepped in and tried to be a sounding board too. They got really close with her.
Vivid, and I remember a lot of little details still. I mean, some aren't always there, or, I look back on other things that have been talked about, like when I was younger, and I'd be like, oh, okay.
We need to start providing resources for our victims. That's what we need to be doing. Instead, we can get all the attention on the media. There's all sorts of movies being made, but what about the victims? Why aren't they getting resources to help them cope future? Like, come on, people.
Okay, I remember that now, but I had forgotten about it, all these years. But I mean, there's like a lot of the little intricate details and stuff. I remember some of those too.
So are you able to push them, or do they sink and stay? Are you able to push those memories away?
No. I mean, I could push them away, but a lot of the times I don't really like to push them away because I guess I feel like if I were to push them away, it would be like avoiding, what had happened to me. And I'm one of those people that like to face reality and be like, well, yeah, that did happen to me. It's just a matter of working through it, just being able to feel that and not really letting it sink in and stay to where it hurts me, but to not push it away to where I just completely feel like it never happened.
You're so healthy in that way. How do you think you got there at such a young age?
I think that I had help with some great people that were able to get me there, because I haven't always really thought about it like that, and I've always kind of used outside things to I guess picture it a different way or to look at it a different way. But I had, when I had went to a treatment place, they helped me, they helped me get there, and it's actually helped me a lot since.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about those years of your life, because you did fall into drugs, correct? Mm-hmm. Tell us about when that started. And do you think it was was it a symptom of what happened? Was it a way to stuff it away? How did you fall into that?
10-year anniversary of what happened to her. And she wants to talk to her about, well, how did you fall into addiction? I wonder. And this is why I sit here and bitch about the understanding and the lack of education about addiction, trauma, cycles of abuse, things like this. But this is even 10 times worse. This is somebody who watched her little brother get shot in the head in front of her, hung till he was lifeless. She watched her older brother be brutalized and drugged back into a home and murdered. She heard the screams of her mother and her stepdad, I guess, her mom's boyfriend, being murdered inside the home at 18. And you have the audacity to ask her, well, how did you end up in drugs? I wonder. What are we doing?
I think it was more like I just wanted to be a normal teenage girl, and so many people were like, oh, Shasta, Shasta this, Shasta that. And it was just like I got so tired of people bringing that to me. And when I finally, met a group of friends, I was 12 years old. It was when I had started middle school is when things started to slip. I found a group of friends that didn't see me like that. They just wanted me to hang out with them, and that's when I, started, smoking marijuana and drinking, and it actually made me feel really good because I didn't feel like I had to focus on all the stuff that was going on in my life at that point. I mean, there was still court stuff going on with Joseph Duncan. There was still counseling that I had to do, and just a lot of stuff. And at 12 years old, being like a pre-teenager, I really felt like I didn't fit in anywhere, and I was going through.
At 12 years old, can you imagine? 12 years old. And that's, again, there's nothing for resources. We put resources into documentaries to tell the stories because there's an audience for that. But what about putting resources into getting the victims and their survivors help? What about that? 12 years old, and she turned to alcohol and drugs to numb the pain. Shocker. This is, no, it did not at all. she talks a little bit about that too in the next one.
A lot of like almost like sense of security issues. I didn't feel good about myself or the person that I was. I didn't, I thought I was maybe too fat or ugly, just kind of going through like, I guess that crisis that a lot of teenage girls go through. So I think that all kind of pushed me over the edge a little bit.
How serious did the drugs get? Was it just marijuana and alcohol, or did it go farther than that?
No, when I was 14, that was my first time ever doing meth. And for 4 years after that, it was,
14. She was 14 when she started using meth. 6 years after she had been brutally kidnapped, raped, watched the people she loves tortured and killed. And she's sitting here more interested in talking about how she ended up on drugs.
Meth, I experienced with other drugs too. A lot of party drugs, acid, mushrooms, just stuff like that. I just
think about that though. I mean, am I the only one that this makes complete sense to? Like, I'm not even shocked. I would expect this, unfortunately, because who wouldn't want to be numb after that? Who wouldn't want to be numb after that and forget in any way, shape, or form? I'm sorry. This is where I have a real hard time with people who addict shame, because obviously the kid was predisposed to it previously. Then she went through one of the most horrific things that any human being could ever experience 10 times. Exactly, lock picking, Cal. Thank you. Can we say it louder for the people in the back? This lone survivor, we couldn't even do right by her. We still couldn't do right by her as a society and get her the help she needed. And it just frustrates me.
Pretty much.
People think once the convicted person's in prison, it's over. No, these people have to pick up the rest of their lives for the rest of their lives. We should be investing the money instead of in these documentaries. Yeah, they help get the information out and it's a part of education. But why can't we get resources for the victims?
Much anything I could get my hands on that made me feel like a different person, I would do.
How did you finally get help or realize you needed help?
Well, I mean, it did take me going to a juvenile detention center to get that help. And the judge was very honest with me. And she's like, Shasta, I feel like you do have a lot of help you can give people. And I feel like you're way better than what you're being. And so she was like, I'm going to send you to a correctional facility. You get out pretty much when you change your life. And she was like, and I hope that later you can look back and thank me. She was like, I've had a lot of kids go there that actually came out and, wanted to thank me because their life is so much better and so much different. So
another, send you away. We can't give you the help you need. So we're going to send you away to a juvenile detention center where you're going to learn so much and be able to deal with all of it so much. I mean, again, she obviously had gotten into some trouble, but this is where we fail our system, or our system fails so often.
And I was really upset because I was like, no, my friends and the drugs and my family and all this stuff. But I went and I was there for over a year and actually got some like really, really good help. That's the place that I'm talking about. Met a lot of girls that had been through a lot of the stuff that I had or had been through similar drug experiences and were able to help me see that my life didn't have to be that.
How did you wind up here in the Treasure Valley? And are you open about telling people that you're now part of our community?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I got here because when I was done with St. Anthony, it was just kind of, I was looking at a lot of court stuff and they were telling me, I don't think that going back to Coeur d'Alene is necessarily the best option for you because of all the people that there and people that got acquainted with the druggie Shasta. And they're just like, I feel like if we were to send you home and go back to that same environment, you could fall back really fast. And I had agreed. And so I actually came to a step down program that is in the Treasure Valley area. And was there for probably about 4 or 5 months, and they helped me get on my feet, get a new place, and just work on my sobriety. And I got to meet a lot of other, girls that came in and out of there that live in the same area. So it kind of helped me with the foundation for friends and stuff like that.
Do you feel welcomed here? Do you feel like this is a home for you? Do you feel like you can be, do you want to be incognito? Do you want to be Shasta here? How does that all work?
I mean, it always feels good to kind of live a normal lifestyle, just without everybody being like, oh my God, you're Shasta. I mean, since I have done some interviews, I have gotten that a little bit, but it seems like a lot of people here are more kind of, like they see me and they recognize me, but they're just kind of like, let's let her live her life. And then, I mean, it was like that up in northern Idaho and Coeur d'Alene too, but there was a lot of people that's like, oh my God, they just kind of maybe almost wanted to meet me so that they can say that they met me. And I've never really met anybody here that has done that. So
good. I'm glad to hear that. So you feel welcomed here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good. Okay, great. Let's talk about your life now. Okay. So you're living here in Nampa. Mm-hmm. You have a great apartment. You're pregnant. Mm-hmm. Tell us about this baby.
Well, on Saturday, I'll be 26 weeks pregnant with my son. His name's Lorenzo. And I don't know, it's completely different. I feel like my whole mindset has changed. It's kind of like I'm very focused on my son and bringing him into a good environment, that every time I make a decision or every time I do something, I'm like, well, how it's going to impact my family. It's just kind of like, I think that mother instinct is already kicking in. I mean, I feel like I've always had that in a sense, because,
this poor girl, it breaks my heart just to even hear her talk about this, because of course, what happens? You get pregnant. She's trying to find those connections that were taken from her. Like, this is so apparent to me. She was only 18 here. She's a baby. Like,
I have a lot of nieces and nephews that I've always been protective over.
So tell us what this baby means to you. I know it's a very special thing in your life. It's new hope, new life. There's so much symbolism in this baby. Tell us about that.
Looking to fit into.
I guess my hope for my son is that I can show him.
Looking for that unconditional love that she has not felt. Like, can you imagine how destroyed this? I just can't even imagine. I can't even imagine.
I definitely don't want to be one of those parents that don't tell their kids anything, and kind of, I want him to know what can happen in life. I want him to know, like as he gets older, what happened to me, and, just kind of like the struggle with that. And I also want him to know that, like, I want to teach him right with his friends, and I want him to just always stay on the right track. I want him to know that education is very important, because I don't know where I'd be today if I hadn't graduated high school. So I guess like I just, I want to teach him all the right things I've done with my life and the paths that I've actually went on. And I hope that he can learn, from my mistakes and the good things that I've done. I just kind of want to give him the,
my mistakes. I don't know. That just bothers me that she even says it's my mistakes. Nobody should be faulting her for wanting to be numb after this situation. I honestly, like, this is, yeah.
Like, when I was younger, I did have a pretty hard life.
This interview is hard to listen to, but the way she talks in this one and then the follow-up is interesting.
Life, we were, money was a very big issue, and I don't ever really want my son to struggle like that. I don't want him to, have to have the power run out, and stuff. I always want him to be taken care of.
Yeah. Well, I think you'll make sure that happens.
Yeah,
I do.
I guess for a long time, like, I always had this feeling that I could not have kids. And, it's been kind of, no one's ever like straight up told me that I couldn't, but it's just been kind of, I've been told that it would be hard for you to, just have a baby with all the trauma that you've been through and stuff like that. So in my head, I was just like, I can't have kids at all. And then when I did get pregnant, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, it was a huge surprise. Like, I didn't even think that it could happen. And then, so like now in that way, when I think of, I am going to have a baby, I still know that just Duncan did not do damage to me that is lifelong. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously emotionally, yes, there are going to be those things because I'm always going to miss my mom or I'm always going to miss my family, but he did not make a permanent mark on my life. And that's just good to know that I can still bring life into this world and not have to.
He didn't make a permanent mark on my life. This poor young girl. It just breaks my heart listening to this. Like, she's making excuses for feeling the way she does. Why wasn't somebody just telling her, no, this is normal. Feel those feelings. Be angry. Be mad. Be numb. Like, why are we not?
That hate in my heart for someone that I don't even need in my life anymore. So.
He didn't steal that from you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he stole my innocence and he stole my family from me, but he's not going to steal the fact that I can, bring not a children into this world, and that makes me really happy.
But it's got to be a struggle. I mean, being this young and having this much responsibility, do you feel like financially it's a struggle sometimes?
Shut up.
Yeah, sometimes it's just kind of like, okay, well, what are we going to do when we need this? I mean, we always have what we need, but sometimes it's just a little scary when,
why don't you ask her if she has somebody there emotionally to support her instead of financially? Like, that's one thing. Yes, of course, the kid needs somebody to financially support her and make sure she has all the things. But what about somebody that's there to support and advocate on her behalf and love her and teach her that it's okay to feel the feelings that she feels and to stop blaming herself? This is freaking insanity. No, nobody would. There's no right way, but just the fact that she has not had the adequate resources even available to her.
You have a baby on the way and you still need so much stuff.
You have an interest in being a counselor one day and inspiring others and helping them.
Yeah.
Why is that something close to your heart? Why do you want to help others in that?
This was 10 years ago. Well, not 10 years ago. This was 8 years ago. So things have definitely changed. In the more recent interview, she speaks a lot more. But I wanted you guys to see the first one so they can. I still don't care what anybody says. She never was given the proper resources. And here you have an 18-year-old trying to justify why she feels the way she does. Nope, not okay. Should have never even had to do this
that way.
Fucking people.
I think I would like to be a counselor or, therapist or help someone.
Nope.
Or help other people. Because I've had so many therapists and counselors that have just not really been helpful. Kind of just like, oh, how do you feel about that? Like, they never really gave me advice on, what I should, it's almost like I've had a lot of counselors that don't have experience with, either a troubled kid or kids that have gone through trauma.
She called herself a troubled kid first and foremost in this interview, and that bothered me instead of a kid that's dealt with trauma. This is what our society does, though. We talk about all of the bad first. Oh, I'm a troubled kid. I wonder how many times she was told that.
And it's just kind of like they're very inexperienced with that. And I want to be one of those experienced counselors that have been through a lot. And so whenever a kid, comes at me with something, it's not a huge surprise. And I'm not like shocked to hear it,
What would you say? I mean, I know it's hard to imagine, but there were thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people worried about you.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you today and how are you doing?
I feel like I'm doing pretty good. I think that, I do have, bouts where I go through depression. I have PTSD and bipolar disorder. I have a lot of stuff going on in my life. So, sometimes when things get stressful, it's very stressful.
Nanya, everybody's healing journeys are absolutely different. You're 100% correct. And nobody can force anybody to talk whenever they want to talk. It's everybody else's stories. But the line of questioning here is so insensitive to any victim. I don't care if it's 10 years anniversary. This girl had been through trouble and this interviewer knew it because she had interviewed her in the past. So she absolutely went in insensitive to this interview. And this gal was failed from the jump. 100% failed from the jump. She was never adequately given resources or anything, which is happening so often.
Even like one little teeny tiny piece of information can just, it kind of feels like the end of the world sometimes. But I feel like I do have the support to be able to get through those situations and talk about, you know, what's going on in my life.
So when you hear that so many people care about you and know you, people who actually care, you know, in their hearts, and you've held a place in their hearts all these years, what does that feel like?
It like helps restore like the faith that I have in
Yes.
others. And it's not like, because I used to see everyone as just like, oh, you're just here for bad intentions. That's what I thought about everybody. But I mean, these past couple of years, just been like, you know what, I see it in a whole different way.
Totally
That's so great. You've had a lot of healing.
100%.
Yeah, I have.
Let's talk about your memories.
not?
I know you have a lot of wonderful memories of your family before this incident, I'm sure. Do you have a lot of those with you? And are you able to let those memories from before the incident push out the memories after?
Yeah. I do remember my mom loved music. She loved listening to music and doing karaoke and singing and, you know, just stuff like that. And I think that's carried on like with me. I love music and I love singing and doing that type of stuff. And I remember just being younger when it was just me and my mom, you know, the boys were at school and I was too young. We would just dancing around the living room and have fun like that. And my mom was huge. Like she always wanted to cook and have food on the table every night when everyone was home and we could eat as a family. And so I helped her cook a lot.
What about Dylan? Do you have a lot of good memories of your childhood together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me and Dylan were only 16 months apart. So, I mean, in a lot of cases, me and him would just kind of click up and we were very, very, very close. There wasn't really a time that we'd really fight or get in any big scuffs. Like we were just always very understanding. It was almost just like, as you know, like how twins are sometimes, where they're just very close and have that kind of connection. That was kind of how me and Dylan were, even though we're not twins or anything. But I mean, we were just very, very close, and we loved, you know, riding bikes and being on a scooter or just even going to the store with my mom. Me and him were just like very attached to my mom. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why me and him were so close, is because we shared that love for our mom.
Very special.
Yeah.
And of course we can't leave out Slade and honor him. What memories do you have of him?
I remember that me and him used to butt heads so much because he was so much older and he wanted to do things with my older brothers and we always wanted him to play with us. And but I do remember that he loved to be outside and do outside things. He liked to hang out with his friends and he liked to go to school to see his friends. And he was a very social kid. I mean, he was shy, but he wanted to, I think that he was like one of those people that wanted to make a difference in the world, but he didn't know how, you know, quite yet. He was still trying to grasp so much, but I do remember a lot about him. Because it kind of that hits my heart more with Slade, because I feel like
this is Shasta Groney, the lone survivor of Joseph Edward Duncan from the Idaho murders that we were watching earlier. This is the little girl 10 years after the incident. This was the interview she gave.
There was so many times that, you know, we fought and we could have had that time together that we didn't get. And it's kind of like a regret in my mind, but I know that I can't go back and change that, or I don't even think that I would take those times back. But I do wish that me and him would have been a little bit closer than we were.
Yes. And what about your mom's boyfriend? Were you close with him? Was he a father figure to you, or?
Yeah, we were close to Mark. He would take us.
Okay. Does anybody else feel really uncomfortable with this line of questioning, or is it just me? Like this is a 10-year anniversary of their incident. And I just find this. Ooh, yeah. Hold on. I'm switching this interview out. I am going to go to the other one. I can't listen to any more of that before I blow a cork on somebody, because this just isn't it.
Monday.
And I guess this kid was failed 100%, 100% failed, absolutely failed. And so many of them, people are failed. Yeah, exactly. That's the hard thing. Like to hear her put herself down for the very things that she went through is really heartbreaking. It is very uncomfortable to listen to her. Like we have heard what he's done to other people. We've heard how many victims he had. We heard all of those other things. And then to hear one of his victims blame themselves, call themselves a troubled child. Like, Honey, you were 8. You were 8. I don't know.
Police are following up hundreds of tips in their search for Shasta and Dylan Groney.
A little girl, a face no one could forget. Incredibly, 6 weeks later in July, 8-year-old Shasta Groney was spotted here at the Denny's restaurant in Coeur d'Alene with her family's killer, Joseph Duncan.
I mentioned something to my buddy Chris, and I said, I think that looks like Shasta a lot. And he's like, I think it does too. And I was like, no, I said, I know for a fact that's her. There's no question in my mind to it. That's her.
Hi, friends. This is Linda, the manager at Denny's. Yes. I've got a little girl here with a tall gentleman, and she looks so much like this Shasta.
The joy of Shasta's rescue was followed by the devastating news that her brother, 9-year-old Dylan, had been murdered by Duncan as well. More heartbreak for father Steve Groney.
He's very happy his daughter's back. She's safe. He's obviously saddened by what we believe to be the death of Dylan.
Count 1. The defendant, Joseph Edward Duncan III.
Killer Joseph Duncan was tried and sentenced to death, but he's still in the appeals process. Steve Groney has been there every step of the way.
Yeah, until they fry him, there won't be any closure anyway. And God willing, I'll be around for that because I'll be sitting front row center. And if I'm not around for that, then I'll have even better seats.
10 years have passed, but Shasta Groney is someone the people of Idaho could never forget. She says her release all those years ago was just the beginning of her rocky road to healing.
I know it's hard to imagine, but there were thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people worried about you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay, so that's that. Hold on. Let me go back over here for a second. I grabbed the wrong one. Oh, these people pissed me off so bad. Wait, hold on. Oh, here we go.
Would do.
how did you finally get help or realize you needed help?
Well, I mean, it did take me going to a juvenile.
Hold on. I got to get there.
It's coming along.
We're gonna watch this part of it.
Yeah, we like the monkey theme because I always call him like my little monkey and stuff. And he's always like bending, like in the ultrasound pictures, he's always bending weird like monkeys do, or he's always just doing like little cute things.
Tell us about this baby.
I don't know. It's completely different. I feel like my whole mindset has changed. It's kind of like I'm very focused on my son and bringing him into a good environment, that every time I make a decision.
Okay, here it is.
Kind of, maybe the similar feelings.
Oh, this is where, hold on. She got to meet. Here you go.
Have been through a lot. I just feel like I could really help a lot of people. I have like a lot of ambitions and dreams that I want to do. I know I want to write a book, and I know that I want to do some conventions that help women and children. And I think my inspiration was Elizabeth Smart. I've read her books, and maybe I should write a book because her book really helped me.
Who remembers that story? Some of you Utah girls do. You Utah girls will remember this one like it's yesterday too. Your Idaho girls, who remembers this story? Well, I'm waiting on that. Hold on. Here it is. Here's the other one. You guys remember Elizabeth Smart? So, oh, hold on. None of you guys really know about that story? Wait, you don't know about the Elizabeth Smart story? Okay, put a 1 in the chat if you know about the Elizabeth Smart story. Put a 2 in the chat if you don't know anything. A 1 if you know, a 2 if you've never heard of it. And I'm going to freaking blow my mind if you guys do not know about this one. Okay, most of you do. Okay. I was going to say there's no freaking way people don't know about this one. This is another horrible story. She was kidnapped out of her home and kept in the woods behind their home for months on end. Yeah, Yinzi, I knew you were going to say yes. Okay, most of you guys do know. Okay, thank you. Holy crap, that's a huge one. Whoa, okay, yeah. Kidnapped and kept in the mountains. Her sister, that's a whole rabbit hole too. I can't believe these are the stories that imprinted my childhood. Like, young adulthood, I should say. Yeah, I think they were, Nana L. I think they were close in the same time frame. She wasn't kept in a bunker. She was kept in a tent and up in the hills and stuff by a guy that dressed in the all white cultish stuff. Castro, Nana L, didn't one of them have a child too? I can't remember. That one. Okay, let's continue. Crazy, yeah.
You know, and it's just kind of like me and her, you know, are very different situations, but kind of, you know, maybe the similar feelings that we had went through. And
yes,
if I can read a book and be inspired by it, then I feel like other people could read a book and be really inspired by it too.
Shasta had the chance to meet fellow kidnapping survivor Elizabeth Smart in 2012 at a conference. Smart was kidnapped by Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee from her Salt Lake City home in 2002 at the age of 14. She was finally spotted and reunited with her family months later.
I really liked her. I mean, you could just tell that she was like, nothing could really tear her down. Like, she was just so goal-oriented and just wanted to help others.
She was another one that the same thing with her victimization. Like when Shasta was saying she looked over at Joseph asking almost permission for her to tell law enforcement that it was her name. Her kidnappers played mind games on her too, to the point that she actually looked to them for answers and in a way was connected to them and felt bad for what was happening to them. Like, they are so good at their manipulation and their mind tricks. These
others, and just being able to know that someone else felt the same way during their capture, and you know, just stuff like that. She's definitely a part of my life in a way that she doesn't know about.
Shasta's dad, Steve Groney, never gave up on his kids being found, but the incredible elation of Shasta's rescue was followed by the devastating news that 9-year-old Dylan had been murdered by Joseph Duncan. Shasta's dad also lost his son Slade. Steve Groney was and still is committed to getting justice for the murders. Shasta says he is her hero. Steve Groney was in court daily for the Joseph Duncan murder trial and sentencing. He was grateful to the jurors who endured the agonizing, graphic, and emotional trial.
They did go through a lot. They just said that, you know, like family and Shasta are still in their thoughts and prayers, and, you know, especially Shasta.
Steve has passed away. Steve passed away also. He died in 2019. For sure. He did pass away though. Unfortunately, he is no longer with us either.
You know, was all too apparent to them what she went through.
Nobody else really supports me like my dad does. I mean, he went through my...
Steve passed away in 2019. Joseph Edward Duncan passed away in 2021. How unfair is that? How unfair is that?
Addiction with me.
Shasta says she's well aware of the pain her dad still carries with him today.
I mean, he lost his kids. He lost his ex-wife, you know, that hurts him too, you know, so knowing that he hurts kind of in the same way that I do makes me want to help him and be there for him. So, I mean, we are very close. Like we have a very close bond. My dad has taken what has happened to him and actually made a lot out of it. He just has pushed through so much.
Steve Groney has also battled throat cancer for years.
I feel like he's my hero. He's the ultimate survivor because he survived something that happened with his family and was able to, you know, push through that. But he also is surviving from cancer. But I mean, he's in remission and doing really good. So.
He was only 63 when he passed away. Think about that. Oh, that's terrible. 52. He was 52. Oh my goodness. 62. Like this story just freaking pisses me off to all ends.
So
Shasta's dad still lives in North Idaho. Even with all that heartache and pain, Shasta still has wonderful memories of her mom and brothers.
I do remember my mom loved music. She loved listening to music and doing karaoke and singing and, you know, just stuff like that. And I think that that's carried on like with me. we would just dancing around the living room.
What about Dylan? Do you have a lot of good memories of your childhood together?
Yeah, me and Dylan were only 16 months apart. I mean, we were just very, very close, and we loved, riding bikes and being on a scooter, or just even going to the store with my mom. Me and him were just like very attached to my mom.
And of course, we can't leave out Slade and honor him. What memories do you have of him?
I remember that me and him used to butt heads so much because he was so much older, and he wanted.
Who is the one that was? It's not JC. Who was the one right around Elizabeth Smart in 2000? I want to say from 2001 or 2000 to 2003. Was there a high profile one right in there? I think we have her confused with somebody else, but I remember one because I would have been 18, a senior in high school. And I think there was a high profile case right there too, but I can't remember for sure. You know all the dates of this stuff, or you remember names like no other. I think there was another one in that time frame, but I can't remember who.
I had to do things with my older brothers, and we always wanted him to play with us.
After her rescue, Shasta released balloons on Slade's birthday. She talked about her big brother that day.
He was just a really good brother to me, and that he was really sweet to people. Happy birthday, and tell Mom, Dylan, and Mark I love them and stuff, and that hopefully we'll get to see them again.
If I ever think about like the bad memories of the things that I've seen, it does kind of push them away. But I keep them close. I pray, and I pray. Sometimes I talk to them when I'm having a hard time, or I talk to them in my head sometimes, or I just think about their faces a lot. And I have dreams about my mom a lot, so I think that's what keeps her close. And I do have that tattoo of my mom.
Chandra Levy. That's who I was thinking of, is Chandra Levy. That was the case that I could remember. Chandra Levy. That was the name that I.
Her, just like I feel like she's always with me, and they're just always close. So this says, I'll love you forever. I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. The book that my mom used to read had this little quote in there, and she'd always sing it to me.
One day, Shasta wants her son to know about the family that she lost.
I want him to know that, that he has a grandma in heaven that watches him, and just wants the best for him. And I want him to know that he has guardian angels that are always going to constantly be looking over him and being there for him.
When we come back, Shasta tells us what justice means to her. What does she want to happen to the man who took her family from her? We'll find out when Shasta Groening.
Watching a KT.
In the process of an appeal.
All right, we're going to continue this one. I'm going to play another one when she went missing. I found the other one too. There's a second series of this, a more recent one. I couldn't remember. I was like, no, there's somebody else around Elizabeth Smart time, and it was Chandra Levy. I can't remember the details of that. I just remember the names of some of these. Elizabeth Smart, I remember that one pretty well. But Ariel Castro, that whole situation. Has anybody followed that recently? Do we know anything about how they're doing, the victims there? That absolute insanity. Middletown, Ohio. One of Middletown, Ohio. Elle, were you here earlier when I mentioned those two people, the two names? I've got a whole list that I've added to of people. There's a missing 14-year-old and his mom from 20. What did I say that was? Oh gosh, this is why I can't talk about all these cases at once. I'll talk about that one later because I'm going to screw it up with this one. 30 times on average. Oh my gosh. I've heard there's a lot of cases over there. Chilcott, Ohio. There's another, somebody I was just watching was doing a case on an Ohio missing. She was taken off a beach in maybe that's Kentucky. Maybe it's Kentucky. She was taken off a beach in 1995. She was snatched up. A guy watched the whole thing on telescope. Somebody came out from the woods behind the beach and grabbed her and took her, and she was never seen again. I think that was Kentucky, possibly in 1995. Anyways, that's another story that I'm going to talk about. Oh, Elle. Yes, there's a missing girl from the Blackfeet Indian Reservation, which is home in Montana for me. Browning, there's a girl that's been missing out of there too, completely disappeared. There's supposedly been sightings, but they've never even looked into there's so much craziness. Okay, anyways, let's continue the rest of this one. There's so many, and people are fighting over content
right now. His criminal history dates back to when he was a teenager. He was already a convicted sex offender at the time of the Groney killings and was facing more charges for yet another abuse case.
You know how often it is too that you hear that the family members pass away way sooner or earlier ages? Think of the stress.
Convicted sex offender Joseph Duncan was out on a $15,000 bond in Minnesota for molesting a 7-year-old boy when he drove to North Idaho, stalked and attacked the Groney family. He brutally killed Shasta's mother, Brenda Groney, her boyfriend, Mark McKenzie, and Shasta's big brother, Slade. He kidnapped Shasta and Dylan.
Why would a killer come in and kill 3 people and take 2 children? And does that give us hope for the children? You bet it does. And that's all we have to go on at this point is hope.
This is where the FBI says Shasta and Dylan Groney were held hostage by Duncan for all those weeks. This is where the remains of Dylan Groney were found. Heartbreaking letters that Shasta had written to her dad in captivity were also discovered. 6 weeks later, Duncan was arrested after he was spotted at this Denny's in Coeur d'Alene with 8-year-old Shasta.
I was like, God, that little girl looks a lot like Shasta. I said, it's going to be okay, honey. And she goes, I just want my daddy. I just want to go home. And I said, these nice officers are going to get you to see your daddy. You're going to see him very soon.
He was tried and sentenced to death. He also pleaded guilty to the 1997 murder of a 10-year-old California boy by the name of Anthony Martinez, in a deal that allowed him to avoid another death penalty sentence. Right now, he's sitting on federal death row in Indiana. He's appealed many times. In October of this year,
thankfully, he is no longer with us.
Duncan's lawyers filed a petition with the Supreme Court to further appeal. A decision is expected by June of 2016.
So we know he was convicted. We saw that. Let me see if it gives the update at the end. I don't think it does. Let me hop to the next one. Okay, there
are so many people out there who we know are watching this and may want to reach out and help Shasta achieve those goals. There are several ways you can do that. You can donate to her GoFundMe account. Visit her baby.
All right, that's that. Let me take this one off here. Let me go over here. This is horribly sad, but I just want to make sure people understand the severity of the trauma that people go through, because it's horrifying what happened. This poor girl has been through so freaking much. Absolutely terrible.
Welcome to the Saturday News. I'm Gretchen Parsons. We begin in Nampa tonight, where police are looking for 22-year-old Shasta Groin and her 2 young sons. Now, you may recall Shasta Groin was the woman who was kidnapped as a child out of Coeur d'Alene by serial killer Joseph Duncan back in 2005. Groin has been living in Canyon County recently, and now Nampa police say no one has seen her or her 2 sons. Our Misty Inglet joins us from the newsroom. Misty, what do police know at this point?
Well, Gretchen, I spoke with them about half an hour ago. They say they are investigating a lot of different leads right now. According to police, Shasta Groin and her 1-year-old and 2-year-old sons were last seen in Caldwell sometime last night, around 16 hours ago. Nampa PD says a friend called them after Shasta was late to meet her. Shasta is 5'5" with red hair and green eyes. She also has Fear God tattooed above her left eye and Midnight tattooed above her right one. Her boys both have brown hair and brown eyes. At this point, officers tell me they are considering this a welfare check just to make sure that Shasta and her boys are okay. Now, coming up tonight at 10, I'll have more details from Nampa Police about this case. Gretchen, back to you.
All right, thanks, Misty. Well, in the meantime, if you have any information about where
she went missing a couple different times, CNC. Like that's the right, Angel. This whole one was so triggering with the Coeur d'Alene in Kootenai County. I can't even say it like they do. Kootenai. It's Kootenai County. It's just mind blowing to me that they can't. But I have a hard time pronouncing their names, so I don't care. But that was a lot. The poor kid has had nothing but struggles. She's not a kid anymore. She's a young adult. She's a mom. But she has had a life of struggle, a life of trauma. But think about what she has endured. And not only did she survive that, but she was also to help get closure because he was captive or caught. Then he admitted to the other crimes and brought closure for Anthony Martinez's family. And then the girls in Seattle, granted, that's a hard one because they were transient anyways. I don't know the situation of their parents necessarily. They were out scrounging for food when they were taken. They were already in a bad spot, in a bad neighborhood, like so bad. Pocahontas, Pocatello. Where's Pocahontas? I'm like, what? Yeah, it's so bad. She's gone through hell, but let me find another one. Hold on. She is a beautiful young lady too. She is a beautiful, beautiful young lady. Hold on. I gotta figure out which one. I have so many of these saved. It's unbelievable. And if you want to know more on this story, there's so many good YouTube videos that have been done on this. I might do like a pre-record and do my own actual video and edits and do a once over on it because I don't like all the choppy ones. But we're working with what I'm doing. I just needed something else. That case that I was talking about was that Sarah and Evan, though. I really want to talk about that. That is sad. That is horrifying. They know what more than likely happened to both of them, and nothing's been done. Nothing's been done. It is like disgusting. And you don't see anybody out there protesting in front of their house. Okay, maybe I can't find it. Hold on, give me a second. Oh. Got it. There's one. I'm just going to show you guys this one. So you guys can see it and you can watch it yourself if you would like to. But this here is on True Crime Daily. The Brave. This right here is a great one on her. It's called The Brave Survival Story of Little Shasta Groney. If you want to see it, I can link it in the description too afterwards. All right, y'all, that is that. She would be 2005, 18, 26, 25, 26. She's 25, 26. She's still in the area too. People see her all the time. Unfortunately, she's had it very rough. She's gone missing a couple times. Like, it's too much. How can you expect people to just deal with these type of situations? And it's not like something that you can offer somebody a year worth of counseling and say, oh yeah, you're going to be okay after a year worth of counseling. People have the right to their feelings, but there's also a lot of like, you can't just expect somebody, a year time will heal everything. No, like, and they need breaks in counseling too. Like, there's times when that's a lot of work. Craziness. Yeah. Okay. Let me tell you. Hold on. Let me tell you about the one. I just wanted to talk about that one because it's been that imprinted so hard in my brain. Hold on. It is Sarah Osborne and Evan Chartrand. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. She was 43. He was 14. Foul play is suspected. Whole thing. There's a whole story, but they're still missing from 2017. 2017. There was blood found throughout the entire house, but they couldn't get DNA from the blood. The person that's highly likely involved is still walking around amongst us. There was burn pits. He burnt all of the furniture outside the house. He replaced the flooring and used heavy bleach. And they couldn't get, like, there are so many things and they can't charge him. And she married him and had been sending her best friend emails over the years. And her best friend turned him into investigators when she went missing. He was a whole male escort. She didn't tell anybody that they got married. She had to hide it from everybody. He was so controlling and everything. And her and her son have been missing ever since. And she's got a little girl with her dad. But nobody talks about these cases. No DNA. No, they said it was too mixed with chemicals, cleaning supplies and others. They had burn pits out there, all sorts of stuff. Oh, I keep sweet that. Angel, it is so astounding. We got to talk about that case. We got to, because it is absolutely, it's just mind-blowing. They had blood throughout the entire house. Like Kyle and I were watching a show on it, and they've done a show on it. From her dad. Yes, she had a daughter with not her ex-husband. The little girl, thankfully, is not missing. She was with her dad when Susie and Evan went missing. So thankfully, she's with the dad. But it's absolutely mind-blowing. There was blood throughout the entire house. They have like diagrams of it. He burnt all of the furniture, but there's no shards of evidence. They had cadaver dogs that hit on multiple spots on the property. They sifted through like the ash and the soot. Nothing. I just can't believe it. And he's walking around. He's walking around. Rumors spreading around. She had 2 children. She had Evan. Sorry, I'll say it correctly this time. She had 2 children when she went missing. Evan and her oldest son, went missing with her at the same time. Her little girl was in the custody or with the dad, the little girl's dad, at the time that they went missing. So the little girl is not missing, but mom and son are. Who knows about the story I'm talking about in Kentucky? I got to find the name on that. That's going to drive me nuts. That's a freaking mind-blowing story too. They thought they had a suspect. They went to serve a search warrant and he shot himself. But investigators think that there's probably more than likely 2 people involved. And she's never been found. Never been found. Hold on. I can't even believe. And her mom is the one that's kept it in the... Oh, right here. Heather Teague. Heather Teague. I know I have some East Coasters out there and some Kentucky people around. Does anybody remember that from 1995? Heather Teague, August 26th, 1995. And they've never found her body. And there was a possibility that at one time they thought that maybe she had ran off. Yes, Heather Teague. 1995, August 26, 1995. She was taken off a beach, kidnapped, broad daylight. Somebody watched it happen, reported it to police, but because where she was kidnapped is on the border of Indiana, I think. And the original 911 call went to Indiana instead of Kentucky. I got to get the details 100% correct because... And then he had to call back and reported it by the time they got there. But a farmer or rancher in the area had hired somebody to go down and start taking videos off their property and videotaped a man with a red Bronco. And that's the guy that they went to talk to. When police went to talk to him, he shot himself. The whole thing is just wild, but they've never found her ever. But then they were listing like tons of cases from the same area all around the same time that are still unsolved. Kristen Smart. What year was that, Dumpy Dump? I remember that name very, very well too. Josh Powell's story. Oh my God, that's another one. Yes. No, she's never been found. Everybody that goes out here in the mountains in Utah still looks for her every time anybody goes hiking or anything. Everybody still looks for Susan. The Summer Wells case, 96. Thank you, Becca. I remember certain things about that one, not as well. The Susan Powell case. Oh my gosh. And that was another one that slipped through the freaking cracks. Slipped through the cracks. Oh, there's so many unsolved. There are so many unsolved. So many unfound people. So many unsolved cases. And they sit out here and they spin the same case over and over and over again. What about these other stories? Yeah, the boys, that shit pisses me off. Fucking Mormon church. Yeah, 1,800 a day, they say. 1,800 a day go missing every single day. How are those statistics? How? What? Huh? Jamie Class. I remember that name, but I don't remember why. What? Your husband's sister was murdered by... Your sister-in-law was murdered by her husband. Was that here in Utah? Crazy. Anyways, okay. I'm out of here. I gotta go pick up kids. I will be back shortly and we'll talk shit later. All right, y'all. See you later. We're just breaking it up and doing a bunch of different content over here now. Have a good couple hours. I'll see you guys in a little bit. Jake Patterson killed Jamie's parents. And oh, it is what it is. I can't remember all of the details of that. The cases in the MMIW. Oh, that is absolutely disgusting. How there's lists of missing people. Lists. And the police report, like there's not even a missing persons report filed on half of these people, but they're missing. It's yeah. There's a whole crap ton of that. Anyways, okay, I'll see you guys later. Bye.